Chapter 1076. When the last bracket was removed in the explosion, the reborn Nautilus appeared in front of everyone again, but it was completely different from the past. It was no longer the streamlined and perfect outline of the past. Instead, it had become angular and ferocious. Under the thick armor, it was like a giant pillar piercing the sky. On its body, the solidified power constantly distorted the surrounding environment, causing the value of the depth stabilizer to soar crazily. Unlike the Redeemer of Hell, created by the Republic, it was about to become Hell itself. With the activation of the Nemo engine, a faint light emerged from the darkness, and the sound of tide from the present realm arose. Unfortunately, there was no longer a glimmer of light from their hometown in the sky. Everything had been covered by countless black shadows. Their world had been covered by the clouds of hell. War had arrived. Looks like we're already too late. Huaisher sighed softly. Whether it's sooner or later, as long as we do it, there's always time. Anton stared at the Nautilus in front of him. After a long time, he reached out and patted its outer armor. Let's set off again, friends, the old man murmured softly, causing the Nautilus to let out a low cry in response. They couldn't wait any longer. Behind them, in the white fog that was gradually dissipating, the solemn cemetery had disappeared. Under the careful operation of the crows, all the graves were moved into the warehouse. The secret ritual of the burial ground was set up on it, giving the solidified souls a peaceful sleep. Now, the frame structure of the sun's ship had been shrunk. After completing the final operation test, most of the load and weight were discarded. Through the preset orbit, the core keel and engine were connected to the Nautilus, replacing the giant's heart to beat again. Everything was ready, and the final finishing touches were completed. Now, after a long and arduous journey, everything was finally ready. They were going home. Before boarding the ship, Huaisher turned around, looked at the guide behind him, and thanked him for the last time. Thank you for your guidance and help along the way, Mr. Odom. Although you love excitement more than your duty, you still fulfilled your promise. Huaisher said, I'm deeply grateful for this. Of course. Why are you so serious? You can still find me in hell in the future. Odom waved his tentacles and whistled happily. Well, if you can return to your hometowns. Anyway, don't forget about me if something like this happens again. To be honest, I really don't want to experience such a journey a second time. Huaisher couldn't help but let out a long sigh. After a moment of silence, he finally asked in confusion, I've never understood, Mr. Odom. Why did you choose to become a member of the Utopia? After all, Utopia doesn't have a good reputation in hell, right? To watch the show. Odom answered matter-of-factly, Isn't that reason enough? If it's just for fun, there's fun everywhere, right? Huaisher asked in return, Even without the Utopia, this world is still exciting enough for a creature like you. You have an enviable long lifespan, an immortal life force, and this almost omnipresent observation. With such power, no matter where you go, there will definitely be someone who meets any of your conditions, right? Why did you choose us? Why did you choose the Republic? That Odom's tentacles scratched his big left eye, and he was a little embarrassed. I'm not used to such serious topics, but since you've asked, I can't hide it from you. He thought for a moment and answered seriously, If I have to find a reason, it's probably because we're standing on the same side of benefits. A creature of hell saying that they were standing on the same side of benefits to someone who had sworn to destroy hell and establish the eternal kingdom. Such a scene was indescribably absurd. But Odom's tone was so serious and solemn as he told the man in front of him, I sincerely hope that the kingdom of heaven can be completed, Your Excellency Huaisher. The real kingdom of heaven, the real fourth project, it's because of this that I chose to switch sides and join your side. Why? Huaisher was puzzled. Do you hate hell that much? No. Just like how the present realm created you, hell also created me. Even if I feel annoyed occasionally, who would hate their hometown from the bottom of their heart? Odom seemed to be smiling as he answered happily, I just want to know what the kingdom of heaven you envisioned, that terrible world without hell and calamity, looks like, and how it can be maintained. Huaisher was stunned. Mr. Huaisher, To me, the people of the Republic are one of the few interesting existences. They're always so contradictory. Odom sighed with nostalgia. They're more noble than anyone in the present realm. At the same time, they're crazier than the rulers of hell. They're so eager for the secrets of hell, but they're even more resistant to hell itself. Even if countless hells were once the present realm, even if the present realm was born from hell and created by the abyss, as for them, they abhor it. That's the reason why I joined the Republic. The rust snail replied frankly, I want to see what the world they know, the world you created will look like, and what kind of ending it will usher in. Even if the price is my life, it doesn't matter. Now it's time to part. In your story, my part is coming to an end, but I'll be here looking at the future you've created. In the end, the former ruler bowed slightly and said with blessings, I wish you a safe journey, and I hope you can get what you want. Then goodbye. Huaisher nodded solemnly. Goodbye. The rust snail slowly wriggled its body and returned to the pool on the ground. After absorbing the last bit of water, it burrowed into the moist soil and fell asleep again. However, the will that resided in it had already left silently. No, perhaps at this moment, it was somewhere in countless places, observing all of this. Thus, it patiently waited for the future of the Republic to step onto its own stage. Let's go. Huaisher pushed the wheelchair and closed the door behind him. He smiled at his companions on the bridge. Let's go home. Go home. Raymond pressed the last button. At that moment, a low vibration spread out from the Nautilus's body. Like the long song of a whale, the distant echo once again rose into the sky of this hell after 70 years. At that time, the souls of the deceased sang softly, and the glory of the past hummed softly. Just like that, slowly, firmly, carrying the foundation of the past. The huge battleship spewed out dazzling flames. It burned the earth and expelled the darkness. It broke everything in front of it. It broke into the abyss. It flew clumsily toward the place where the light covered by countless dark clouds came from. The long journey home began from here. Go home, go home, go home. Look, they're gone. In the deepest part of the withered area, beside the burning fire, a middle-aged man with gray hair looked at the distant stars and smiled. A cooing white dove fell from the sky and landed on the girl's shoulder. She raised her head and looked at the rising starlight for the last time. She slowly got up and patted the dust off her skirt. Well, let's go too. Follow me closely and don't get lost again. I said I won't wander around this time. Uncle Fu, can you stop smiling? Sorry, Mystic Bird told me to look after you. Well, hold the rope well. Fu Sangwang tied the rope tightly around the girl's waist and reminded her sternly, don't wander around. Promise. Yes, of course. The girl nodded vigorously and promised sincerely. Just like that, she followed behind him and continued forward. However, in the end, she couldn't help but turn back and look at the romantic stars that disappeared into the abyss. Carelessly, he slipped. Pa! Fu Sangwang turned back in confusion, but the other end of the rope was empty. Only a pitiful and innocent dove was left on the ground, cooing pitifully. In the sudden silence, Dongxia's strongest opened her mouth in a daze and couldn't help but raise her hand and slap her face. She felt despair. Didn't she say she wouldn't wander around? Mountain ridges collapsed, the ocean boiled, and in the burning sky, blood-red rain fell like tears. On the endless sea, the turbulent tide kept rising, and then shattered and collapsed under the impact of the dark fleet. The frozen icebergs were bathed in the scarlet rain, and countless corpses and ship fragments drifted between the waves. The Najilfa fleet rumbled forward, breaking through layers of obstacles. Behind them, the army of the fallen kingdom roared and followed closely behind. Like a spreading tide, spreading with blood and water, there was no end in sight. Above the sky, the molten fire kept falling, and the waves of destruction could not keep up with the speed of the blood river. As if it was endless, the malice from the deepest part of hell kept emerging. A pitch-black color spread out in the images of all the observers. Countless large groups formed the endless darkness, surging like a tide, nibbling away everything in their path. And right in front of the black tide of the fallen kingdom, the Najilfa fleet kept trembling, and countless skeletons grew from the ship, bursting out with crazy roars. Although the casualties were so heavy, and the fleet had lost 2/3 of its members, and only a dozen vanguard ships were left, the fierce aura became more and more solid, constantly expanding and bathed in strange flames. It was like a living creature. It was growing, devouring death, destruction, blood, and struggle. All of these were the resources it needed to survive and grow, and this grand war was its cradle and cradle. A more and more violent aura rose from the flames, brazenly smashing through the mountains in front of them and trampling through the obstacles. The current Nager's fleet had already transformed from its original ragged appearance into a ferocious behemoth. Corpses were constantly sent from the waves to the hull, and then merged with the bloodthirsty warships, completely absorbed, and became a part of the ship's hull. In the pale color of the bones, countless fragments of source substances surged, forming the gray-black formed by the disaster. Whether it was the death of the enemy or its own, it was a part of its growth. With the suppression of the 3 major blockades and the death and destruction brought by countless cannons, it thrived under the nourishment of the Command Bureau. On the giant sails, scarlet eyes looked through the fog and looked at the bulging defensive line and high wall on the distant sea, full of greed. Just like this, the frenzied ship of destruction roared, led the endless black tide behind it, and advanced toward the enemy with full force. On the defensive line, in the command room, everyone's expression was solemn. If they did not resist, the enemy would inevitably drive straight in. But if they fought back, it would only strengthen the enemy. Fighting against such an enemy was so disgusting that it was like eating a fly. The Najilfa fleet has entered the second stage. According to the observation and calculation of the Bronze Eye, in less than half an hour, they will enter the third stage, and then begin to complete the fusion stage. The representative from the aerial floor submitted new information to the command center. What about the decision-making room? The commander from the Iron Cast Legion asked, Madam A.I. Ching, is there any new order from the decision-making room? No, I'm afraid we still need to stall for time. The representative calmly replied, slow down the formation of the real Najilfa battleship. Stop the attack of the fallen nation, no matter the cost. I'm afraid you and I are both part of the price, sir. When necessary, you will be granted the authority to use the relics of authority. Now, the Deep Sky Legion will listen to your orders. Accompanied by her words, the light of the Rainbow Bridge descended from the sky. Outside the high walls of the White City Fortress, on the surface of the sea that had been ignited by Scarlet, warships appeared out of thin air. Under the transport of the Rainbow Light, the Mobile Corps and Deep Sky Fleet that had been roaming and fighting at the border had arrived here. Countless huge cannons were raised and aimed at the tide and shadow in the distance. The moment the command to fire came, a blazing metal torrent rose, once again tearing the bloody sky, and all the opponents that stepped into the attack range were completely buried. The spreading dark tide paused for a moment, but the blood river was still spreading. More enemies, more large groups, and more monsters emerged from the underworld. When the infinite hell bared its fangs in this narrow space, it turned into a frenzy that was enough to devour everything. 6 rounds of artillery fire could only delay for less than 10 minutes. When the high-pitched horn sounded from the White City Fortress, the huge warships were driven with all their strength against the torrent and moved toward the black tide and shadow in the distance. The battle of no return had begun. The situation is not optimistic. In the decision-making room, Mystic Bird pinched the pipe and sighed. The fire in the pipe had already been extinguished. When he wanted to take 2 puffs, he could only smell the cold ashes. Are we giving up on the 4th Fleet, just like that? He asked. The Invincible Fleet of Rome is ready, and the Revenge Fleet of America has also completed the assembly, but the decision-making room did not approve the application. The white-haired Archbishop of the Russian Federation replied, the war has not yet begun, and the number of sacrifices has already been determined. Being so rational and cold, I don't know if it's good or bad. Could it be that Sir Mystic Bird can't see it clearly? There are too many variables. I don't want to see it, and I don't dare to see it. Mystic Bird shook his head, threw the pipe in his hand on the table, and sighed silently. Even if I see it, I'm afraid I can't see it. The Archbishop was silent for a moment, and suddenly asked, "Are the North Star and the Cheongchi in White City?" "Yes, I heard that the Knights of the Holy Grail have also been deployed. We are all the same. If you want to panic, let's panic together. Why do you need to find reassurance from me?" Mystic Bird smiled helplessly. No matter how much consideration there's only a saying in this world. The rest can only be known after the cup has been lifted. Let's wait. The Archbishop sighed hoarsely. Well, let's wait. Mystic Bird closed his eyes and stopped looking. Waiting was always the most difficult time. Compared to waiting, the only thing that could beat it was probably death. Now, death had mercilessly arrived on the battlefield. In the bloody tide, there were constantly flames rising into the sky. If one looked down from the sky, it was just a boring picture that was constantly swallowed by grayish-black and scarlet. The sunken wreckage of the battleships sank into the dark and cold deep sea, and there were even more that pulled the enemy into nothingness in the explosion. When the bursting flames were extinguished on the surface of the sea that was burning with oil, the burning bone ship became more and more ferocious. The huge ship had already reached a length of several thousand meters. On the black sail, countless empty eyes were filled with madness and greed. On the ship of the dead, the broken corpses in the flames suddenly healed again, and the dead souls climbed up again from the gift of hell. The eternal struggle was calling for them. It made them roar hungrily, and they couldn't wait to step into the war that would destroy their enemies and themselves. They didn't care about the result. The relic of authority, Najurfa, had stepped into the third stage and was about to be completed. However, above the sky of White City, a huge shadow appeared again. The ruler that was covered in abscesses and ulcers roared, and the dragon spread its wings. Wherever it passed, everything was distorted. Pus, blood, and rotten flesh fell into the sea, soaked in scarlet, and planted the seeds of disaster and distortion. Soon, countless monsters grew. As if it wanted to cover everything under the shadow of its wings, the rotten dragon greedily gnawed on the corpses floating in the sea. It didn't even let its allies go. It plundered the endless army of hell and drank the river of blood. As a result, the body shrouded in decay became bigger and bigger. A hateful roar rose into the sky. Just the sound wave alone tore a huge gap in the sea, and the seawater was turbulent in fear. The ruler had already risen into the sky again. Ignoring the rain of blood and fire that kept falling, the mountain-like head flew toward White City Fortress on the first line of defense, stirring up a fierce wind. A huge tornado appeared out of thin air above the sea. The corpses and distortions gathered, turning into a pitch-black storm. Just like that, it crushed these insignificant insects. F*CK. This is F*King unexpected. On the city wall, Yin Chinga, who was smoking nervously, widened his eyes and was dumbfounded. Beside him, a huge outline and shadow appeared behind Cheongchi. The evil beast sucked the blood in the air, grinned, and roared silently. "Coward, just follow me when the time comes." She glanced at her companion. "I'm not afraid. What are you afraid of? Is this a matter of whether I'm afraid or not?" Yinchinga was numb. Even 100,000 doppelgangers can't deal with this, right? Lord Tyr will have to trouble you. In the formation of the cast iron army, at the front, the commander picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "Please try to buy us some time." Why does it have to be Friday? Why is it always Friday? A hoarse and tired voice came from the sound of the electric current. A skinny man stepped on the stairs and walked up the city wall. A solid silver glow enveloped his body, regenerating his broken left arm. On his naked upper body, there were countless runes that radiated dazzling colors, infusing the pale face with blood. Then, a blazing light that was as hot as the sun gushed out from his burning eye sockets. The existence known as the natural enemy clenched his million-forged hammer. The earth shook, and a huge wave rose out of nowhere. In the fierce wind, he roared and smashed down with the hammer in his hand. In the blink of an eye, the hell tornado that covered heaven and earth emitted a cracking sound. The dark storm was torn apart in the middle by the purest power. But after the storm dissipated, the roaring dragon of decay swooped down, carrying the cataclysm. It swept across an endless distance and headed towards White City. Tyr took another step forward. Like a giant, his body rapidly expanded. The hammer in his hand quickly cracked, and a wide, surging blade of light quickly extended from the broken hammer. Come, come, my dear Lord Decaying Dragon. On his rune-covered face, Tyr smiled and revealed an expectant expression. After 30 years, we'll meet again. It was at that moment when the cataclysm and God's power were about to collide. An ear-piercing alarm burst out from the first defense line, from the command room, and from every corner of the command center. A scarlet light shrouded everything. Countless people stood up in shock. They widened their eyes and screamed in shock, because a brand new signal appeared from the observation of all the mirrors. The massive cataclysm fell toward the battlefield like a star, toward the defense line, and toward the reality itself. A terrifying aura stirred in the abyss and tore apart the network of blood rivers. It brushed past the border of the fallen kingdom and caused the huge kingdom to tremble. On the battlefield, the sky trembled and collapsed. Terrifying waves rose in the ocean, and countless blood rivers were disturbed and collapsed. When the identification signal appeared on the screen, angry roars and screams came from the decision room. Everyone couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. That's destruction element. It was as if the true destroyer from the abyss had arrived and was tired of the long preparation. Haha, it's too late, it's too late. In the depths of the withered zone, the jester in the bottle laughed maniacally and mocked his enemy. At this depth, Nautilus struggled to sneak forward, carrying a huge weight on its back as it slowly trekked. However, after wasting so much time, it still couldn't escape the shackles of the abyss. It had only floated up 2 depths. It was still a hopeless distance away from the reality. Not to mention the countless enemies on the way. The light of the reality had long been obscured by darkness. The blood-colored river was like a net, enveloping the entire world in a cocoon of destruction. They were outside the surging darkness, unable to move forward. Is this the successor of the utopia? Is this the treasure you've been yearning for? The jester in the bottle laughed viciously. Look, the great Nautilus. An empty shell, a tomb with power, a thing that only looks good. Ha ha! What have you found in the abyss after all this trouble? Trash! Ha ha ha, trash! In the gloomy atmosphere, Gregory looked over expressionlessly. Is the bottle's hospitality not good enough? Mr. Hades, should I take care of you first? Isn't this the right of the winner? Hades replied mockingly. You can tear me into pieces, everyone, but won't change your ridiculous situation and your tragic future. How many times do I have to emphasize it? You've been abandoned by the world you love. However, you could try. Maybe when the country destroys your world and the people you love turn into skeletons, you might still be on your way. Ha ha! He laughed maniacally. It was full of mockery and viciousness. He praised his comical opponents to his heart's content, looking forward to seeing anger or distortion appear on their faces. However, Huaishur didn't say anything from the beginning to the end. He only held his chin and quietly stared outside the observation window at the endless dark abyss. In the end, Hades's laughter stopped abruptly. There's one thing, Hades. You're right. Huaishur slowly turned his head and looked at the jester in the bottle. His expression was not angry or gloomy. It was so calm that it was frightening. Nautilus might indeed be a shell. We don't have enough technology and power to truly awaken it. However, haven't you forgotten something? In his hand, between his opened 5 fingers, the sleeve moved slightly. A timid white mouse poked its head out from inside. After seeing Hades, it quickly shrank back into Huaishur's sleeve. Hades, who was laughing maniacally in the bottle, froze in place. By the way, I forgot to tell you. Huaisha reached out and stroked the white mouse's fluffy head. He smiled and told it, "Your car is good, but it's mine now." In the bottle, in the darkness that trembled with anger, the incomplete eye widened. In an instant, it was covered with blood vessels, and its eyes were about to crack. "Huaisha, you son of a b***tch, you damn scum. How dare you blaspheme our holy land?" Hades roared. The rotten meat in the bottle kept colliding with his cage. He roared, "Give it back to me. Give Helios back to me. That's not yours." "No, it's mine." Huaisha held up the pitiful white mouse in front of the bottle and rubbed his cheek intimately with it. He asked softly, "Am I right, Fishball?" Fishball squeaked twice and pulled Huaisha's ear. He jumped onto his head and was unwilling to come down. He didn't even look at Hades. It was hard to believe that the fragment in the bottle could actually make such a furious and mournful cry, as well as a furious roar. It was so tragic. It kept ramming itself against the perfectly safe bottle. In its anger, it even caused a tiny crack to appear on the surface of the bottle. However, it could only watch as the former Helios fell into Huaisha's arms. And now, on top of Huaisha's head, the white mouse slowly raised its head. The fluffy fur slowly dissipated, but below, the soft body began to disintegrate rapidly, turning back into a glorious source substance and unfolding again. From it, countless complicated and overlapping secret instruments spread out in an instant, enveloping the entire silent Nautilus. The miraculous imprint from Helios operated in this unfamiliar domain, causing the Nemo engine to operate fiercely, and the sound of the tide was loud. At this moment, this place was the territory favored by the gods. The reappearance of Helios. And just in the shroud of the infinite matrix, Huaisha raised his head, looked up at the scene engulfed in darkness, and opened his arms. It was as if he wanted to embrace everything in front of him. It made Hades in the bottle stiff. His incomplete eyes trembled violently in disbelief. "Wait, what are you doing?" His voice was hoarse and trembling, full of fear. Huaisha, what the F*** are you doing? You F** King Dare. Of course I'm doing what you've done before." Huaisha looked back with a meaningful expression. "Isn't this what you taught me, Hades? Here, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have thought of such a method, and I would have missed the most important moment for celestial genealogy in the Republic. Thank you for telling me," he smiled and said softly. "The realm has a gravitational force." In that instant, in the abyss, the Nautilus shook violently. Helios's light burst forth, illuminating the dark void. The huge secret instrument endlessly extracted the source substance stored in it, recreating the peerless achievements it had once created. The mystic instrument of creation was reactivated. "Here, order everything to descend the spirit of the great god." Huaisha raised his head and announced solemnly. The low voice rose from the Nautilus and echoed in the abyss of absolute nothingness. Under the suppression of endless solidification, the divinity circulated and traced upwards, evolving at a jaw-dropping speed. The gift from a friend reappeared from the darkest hell. The purest light lit up from his body, even if it was just a spark. However, the hoarse and low voice echoed in the depths and spread, causing a second voice to emerge from the surging depths. "I am the light. I am the day. I am the ruler." In the burning light, Huaisha propped up his body with difficulty, raised his head, and roared, "I am the source of all illumination in the world." The light shook again and burned. It was as if the sun had fallen into the eternal darkness, releasing a tyrannical light. At the bottom of the abyss, the flute player's smile froze slightly. In the deepest part of the present realm, the sleeping god woke up from his dream and cast a puzzled glance at the abyss. Because a mighty echo that could not be distinguished by human ears was transmitted between hell and the present realm, calling out to this world, to everything, telling him, "I am the King of Light." At that moment, in the deepest part of hell, in the quiet area, the divine soul that had dissipated into nothingness faintly reassembled. As if he had understood something, he chuckled slightly. He sent the authority in his hand to Huaishur. "I'll leave it to you, my friend." "Yes, leave it to me." Huaishur nodded, looked at the light of nothingness in his hand, and laughed silently. This was the authority that did not have any killing power in this world, nor did it have any power. It was the brilliance left behind by Balder in the mortal world. It was purely connected to all things, as if it was hugging, gently pulling everything into its embrace, making all things one, harmonious and unharmed. At that moment, the mysterious instrument of creation was finally completed. When Huaishur raised his head, a dazzling crown appeared on top of his head, and a majestic light wheel condensed behind him, radiating in all directions. The mighty sound of the bell resounded throughout the abyss. It was the silent Nautilus shouting loudly. It spewed out endless flames, like the crown of the scorching sun. The power of the god of light descended here, illuminating all the darkness. Moreover, it sent out a distant call towards the present realm. A glimmer of light was thrown out from the Nautilus's sun wheel like a spider's silk. In an instant, it extended endlessly, galloping in the eternal abyss at the speed of light. Finally, it was casually connected to the pillar of the present realm, bringing him Huaishur's sincere request. "Please open the door, I'm going home." Thus, the world seemed to laugh for him. It opened its arms, telling him, "Welcome back." At this moment, the eternal gravitational force between the present realm and God reappeared. The inseparable response was like a rope penetrating the three major blockades, countless lines of defense, and even the deep obstacles. It connected the two again, pulling the Nautilus, which was sinking in the abyss, up towards home. Moving forward again. In hell, in Huaishur's joyful laughter, the solemn sun wheel opened up endless darkness, tore apart the tides, violently smashed all the shadows in front of it, burned endless disasters, and broke into the darkness created by the rulers. It was rising slowly towards the present realm. No, it was more like it was falling. It reenacted the disasters that had happened in the past and turned itself into a seed of destruction. It accelerated endlessly, accelerated, and accelerated again. In the end, even the observation speed of the probe lens could not catch up with the terrifying gravitational force. It was the stars, and the stars were falling. The Nautilus's armor was burning. The heavy armor forged by Huaishur after exhausting all of his reserves was burned red in the friction with endless disasters. Melted fragments were constantly peeling off the pitch-black pillar under the sun wheel. Gradually, the ferocious outline of the past reappeared in the wanton burning. The roar spread out from the waves. The surging river of blood was torn apart and pierced through. It easily broke through the blood-colored cocoon and brushed past the shadow of the fallen kingdom, leaving behind a tragic ravine amidst the intense friction. The darkness that was not worth mentioning was crushed into pieces, and the shadows formed by countless large groups turned into ashes and dissipated like bubbles. Just like that, a straight ravine was torn out between the infinite depths at this moment, at the top of the defense line of the present realm, beyond the shattered sky. The burning sun wheel was expanding at a terrifying speed, and the embryonic form of the stars appeared. Towards the ocean gathered at the infinite border, towards the dragon of decay and the black tide below. It was done in the most direct and straightforward way. Smash down. In front of the dragon summoning flute's probe lens, the girl was shocked by the terrifying aura. Like a frightened cub, she subconsciously bared her teeth and felt her body trembling. "What is that?" she asked in shock. But beside her, the sleepy old man had raised his eyes and looked at the dazzling light in a daze. Turbid tears gradually fell from his cheeks. Subconsciously, he reached out his hand to the screen. It was as if he wanted to hold something tightly. "Look, Anna, they're all back." He held the bouquet in his arms. Although he was crying, his smile was so satisfied as if he had received the happiness of the world. "Welcome back, my friends. Long time no see. Everyone, do you still remember me?" At that moment, the warning of annihilation apophis disappeared without a trace on the screen of the Command Bureau's decision-making room. Instead, it was replaced by the identification code that reappeared after 70 years. That was the call and obsession from the deepest part of hell, the boat of glory forged by countless sacrifices. Belonging to the Republic, Hell Strike Sequence, Heaven's Battleship, Nautilus. Chapter 1077. The Crimson Burning Star had only appeared in the blink of an eye. In this short period of time, there were simply too many shocking and sluggish changes. But before everyone could react, the exploding sun set off billowing waves and flames, violently spreading in all directions. The vast endless sea was also turbulent in this terrifying impact. The waves raged, and a massive amount of steam rose into the air, forming a thick and suffocating fog in gray-black clouds. In the clouds, a ferocious burning silhouette glowed with blazing light. It illuminated everything. The spreading hurricane blew in all directions, and the terrifying shock caused countless cracks to appear on the walls of White City Fortress, not to mention the spreading blood river and the endless black tide. Everything was violently blown up by the terrifying waves that seemed as if the sky was collapsing. They were torn apart, burned into dust, and then blended into the blood-colored rain that fell from the sky. What is that? Behind the mirrors of East Xia, America, Russia, Rome, and even the countless independent borders and pedigrees, everyone's faces were reflected in the dazzling light on the screen. They were like pale curtains, blankly blank. No matter how slow the playback was, they could only see the huge black shadow shrouded by the sun's corona. The heavy artillery of the Lunar Legion, which border has used the relics of authority without the approval of the Directorate of Defense. The Holy Mountain Project of Rome. Or is it that the fallen country has activated the rope of destruction and thrown the entire hell into the present? It can't be that the mystic bird ignored the ban and forcibly surrendered, right? As countless chaotic thoughts rose and fell in the minds of the bystanders, the warning of the elemental destruction was rapidly replaced by new information in the system. This greeting, which had been sent 70 years ago, was finally delivered to everyone. The Nautilus? The Republic? They actually still have such a weapon. Is that a battleship? The lone noise spread in the decision-making room, and everyone's face was filled with confusion, not knowing what expression to make. The afterglow of the old era had not been annihilated in the darkness. After a long time, the dark hell suddenly fell from the sky. Then, an earth-shattering wave burst forth. Just by relying on the impact of its own mass, it spread the destructive fire and light evenly across the dark battlefield. Wherever the waves passed, everything was quickly peeled off and disintegrated. It was like a sandcastle under the tide. Amidst this terrifying turmoil, a resounding roar soon burst forth. It was at the center of the fall, just below the Nautilus. The rolling tide was surging in horror. The broken wings were lifted again, and the rotten flesh on the bones was rapidly regenerating. The dragon of decay raised its broken head and roared crazily. Above the broken face, the remaining eye was filled with blood. When a mountain-like body struggled to get up again, a jaw-dropping crack had already appeared on its broad back. It was like a ravine that had been cut open. Sticky, aberrant pus and blood spurted out like a waterfall. The ruler screamed in pain. Outside the walls of the White City Fortress, Tyr looked at his opponent in confusion before looking at the burning greatsword in his hand. He still hadn't recovered from his shock. He was at a loss. I haven't even done anything yet. How did you fall? Even if you want to fake a fall, you shouldn't be like this, right? Soon, a ridiculous conjecture emerged in his mind. Could it be it's blackmailing me? It can't be. It's a ruler after all. How could it be so shameless? Moreover, even if it was blackmailing me, I would never pay for it. In the present realm, at the border, in hell, Tyr had fought countless battles in his life, but he had never encountered such a strange situation. Why did something suddenly come crashing down and knock the other side down before they even started fighting? Was it luck? Don't joke around. I'm not the legendary Tian Ming Dragon Lord from 1,000 years ago. after becoming his natural enemy. This was the first time Tyr had such a rich psychological activity. What the hell? What's going on? What should I do? But soon he saw that on the back of the Dragon of Decay, in the deepest part of the huge ravine on the pale bones, it was like a nail that was wedged into the ruler's bones. That warship was almost riddled with holes. Even after experiencing such a terrifying impact, he still hadn't been smashed to pieces. In addition to the ridiculously good quality of the ship, the broken corona and the one-time used mystic instrument of ascension had taken most of the damage for the ship. The most important contribution was the existence of the Dragon of Decay. It was their great savior. And now, the curved cabin door was kicked open from the inside. Thick smoke billowed out from it. Cough, cough, I didn't step on the brakes in time. I almost thought I was going to lose control. Fortunately, there was a cushion. In the light of the dissipation of the miracle, Huaishur held onto the door frame and climbed up from below. He looked up and saw the furious eyes of the Dragon of Decay. It was close at hand. This ugly man, are you the one who saved us? He blinked his eyes curiously. Then, under the gaze of all the mirrors, he revealed a standard apologetic smile that was enough to be recorded in textbooks. You don't look too good. Are you all right? The answer was not at all. Pus, blood, and rotten flesh slowly flowed down from the distorted and broken face like sludge. The scarlet eyes were already filled with anger that could crush the dust in front of it 100,000 times. The murderous intent was ferocious. The dragon roared. The sound was like a huge wave. In the terrifying roar, in the dark mouth, the strange light of decay breath was rapidly brewing. The pollution that was enough to completely corrupt an entire city was gathered in the spit and swept toward the ghost that was descending from the sky on his back. And before that, in the fierce wind, Huaishur helplessly stroked his messy hair. You don't look very good. He sighed and shrugged helplessly. But whether you're well or not, I have some old friends that I want to introduce to you. At that moment, accompanied by his words, a vast brilliance slowly rose from the broken door behind him. It was like countless stars converging into a river, returning to the sky. Those solemn souls moved in the turbulent surface of the abyss, laughing, shouting, crying, and embracing the hometown that was close at hand. And so, there was light. It illuminated the world that was shrouded in darkness once again. Bang! In front of the tide of decay, Huaishur smiled. He held a Fong upside down and landed on the hull below. It was like the first bell was rung. A high-pitched chirp came from the body of the Nautilus and reverberated from the body of Sephora Shur. The soul connected and the stigmata expanded. The resonance began again. It resonated with the world in front of it. Then, everything was swallowed up by the curse-filled breath of aberration. However, in the tide of origin substance that was formed by countless calamities and solidifications, there was a raging madness that tore through the darkness and flew towards the sky. Endless lightning turned into a giant pillar that rose from the body of the Dragon of Decay, penetrated the sky and the sea, and sprinkled a tyrannical and brilliant light. Just as Ah Fong and the Nautilus merged into one in the miraculous resonance. On the back of the Dragon of Decay, the broken warship ushered in the most complete transformation of origin substance. It disintegrated from the constraints of matter and was transformed into a thunderbolt that could tear everything apart by the power that operated here. At that moment, the dazzling thunderbolt tore through the aberration breath, crossed the insignificant distance between the earth and the sea, and blew away the last of the dark clouds. Like an endless, angry dragon, surrounded by stars, it reverberated above the sky. And in the thunderbolt that galloped directly above the defense line, a behemoth suddenly separated from it, swept over the wall of White City, and smashed into the square. The wreckage of the sun's ship tumbled pathetically amidst the ear-piercing alarm and smashed into the other side of the city wall. Billowing smoke rose from the overloaded instruments. Don't shoot. We're on the same side. We're on the same side. Under the aim of countless guns and cannons, Raymond crawled out of the cabin door in a panic and raised his hands high. The truck driver in front roared in grief and indignation. Bastard Huaisher ran away, leaving 3. 5. Cough, cough, leaving us old, weak, sick, and disabled here. Treat your allies well. You have to treat your allies well. But his panicked explanation was quickly drowned out by the rolling thunder from above the sky. The thunderbolt was like a dragon galloping above the sky, setting off a brand new hurricane and stirring up a huge amount of water vapor. Countless thunderbolts continued to fall, and the deafening and resounding thunder overlapped in one place, turning into a solemn sound that was like the sound of the sea and the sky. With this wish, I will once again speak to the heavens. In the midst of countless thunderbolts, the transformed Huaisher spread out his arms and declared to everything in front of him, "Here, I will cut off the calamity of the 4 seasons and establish the foundation of the heavenly palace. With my sacrifice, I will forge an everlasting foundation, and with my body, I will once again raise the gathering place of wind, rain, and thunder. Thus, from the thunder, the sound of the tides of the 7 seas rose again. The phantom of the Nautilus reappeared above the sky like a giant steel whale, riding on the endless thunderbolts and screaming loudly. Oh, is he playing so big? On the sofa in the Stone Marrow restaurant, Tangi, who was holding a drumstick and a soda, was about to stand on her tiptoes to watch the show. Her eyes widened, and she praised, "As expected of you, idiot! What is he doing?" Behind the White City fortress, Forster opened his mouth in a daze, and the cigarette at the corner of his mouth fell to the ground. Advancement. The corner of Gregory's eyes twitched crazily. For a moment, he didn't know whether to admire this exaggerated courage or admire his ability to seek death. He directly activated his advancement secret method in front of the ruler, the Dragon of Decay, and the army of the conquered country. He transformed into a thunderbolt and returned to the sky. He was going to advance. At this moment, the Dragon of Decay roared, spread its wings, and rose into the clouds. It breathed out furiously, and its huge body completely shattered the thunderclouds. In the pus and blood on its back, countless aberrated monsters spread their wings, rose, and constantly disturbed the secret method in the air. They wanted to beat the wandering thunderbolt back to its original form and completely crush that damn bug together with its soul. But before it could get its wish, a silver meteor rose from the ground and smashed on its back again. The heavy force forced the ruler to lower its height. Then its natural enemy raised the burning sword in its hand and stabbed into its neck. IF Asterisk King understand now. Tyr's eyes widened, and he scolded angrily. Why can't you see others doing well? The battle between the natural enemy and the dragon began again. Meanwhile, within the dark tide, there were countless dark streams of light rising into the sky. The saturation strikes from hell had almost instantly engulfed the endless lightning. But the thunderbolts became more and more unbridled and tyrannical. They were reborn, expanded, and extended endlessly, galloping above the thunderclouds and the sky. It was as if there was endless power emerging from the body out of thin air. Huaisher felt that his soul was constantly splitting in the thunderbolts, spreading throughout the sky, shrouding all the oceans under his feet, and holding everything in his hands. Although he did not know where so many correction points came from, since they were given, how could he not use them? Amidst the dancing lightning, there seemed to be a shadow of a 10,000-meter-tall steel palace gradually appearing in the sky. That was the palace of heaven materializing from nothingness. All the changes were born from this. It was as if he was going to recreate the entire hell. Countless machines and steel appeared from the thunderbolts, and the endless complex structures gathered together to form a tower that was 10,000 feet tall. In the whistling sound of the tide, the Nemo engine slowly condensed from the void and fell into the casting furnace in the tower. Then a majestic throne emerged from the thunderbolts, the land of dusk. That magnificent, miraculous shadow shook the souls of every spectator, making all the spectators exclaim in amazement. Even in the command center of the decision-making room, everyone could not help but applaud. Compliments. Only Jaeger stood quietly at the back. In the sharp pain from his heart, he silently clutched his chest, and tears were about to fall. Correction points, my correction points. Bastard Russell, you're not human. You're not King human. Don't you have any conscience? No. If you had even a little bit of that, you wouldn't have dug such a big hole for your King brothers. In a short moment, it had burned enough correction points for 10 third-order ascendants to advance. It was not even enough, and it was still burning. Igor was on the verge of crying because of the fever. Enough, almost enough. Stop burning. Damn it, why is it still burning? It's almost 4%. 4%, brother. Is this King transforming into a ruler? When the silencer of the Silver Ocean turned around and saw Jaeger's twitching face, he could not help but show sympathy and whispered, "How about we stop?" "Stop what?" Jaeger gritted his teeth and squeezed out a voice from between his teeth. "Let him continue burning. I don't believe that he can burn another 4% of mine. Also, don't let him burn for nothing. Isn't he going to advance to Cloud Lord? If it's going to rain, then give him all the rain. All of it." The operator was stunned. "All of it," Jaeger decisively ordered, his eyes red from the correction points burning. They absolutely could not be freeloaded. The most important thing was to reduce the losses and make up for the deficit as much as possible. Otherwise, if they continued burning like this, by the time Huaishur finished advancing, all the ascendants, scholars, and alchemists in the Pantheon who adjusted the climate would have worked for nothing. Everyone had been busy for the whole year, and they were all working for the celestial genealogy? That won't do. Today, the donkey of the celestial genealogy production team has eaten our noodles, so it has to pull our big millstone. Pull as much as it eats. With Jaeger's order, the link from the Bifrost was activated, and the door of the Pantheon opened, allowing Cloud Lord's destiny to cover every place in the Pantheon along with the operation of the Bifrost. Asia, America, Australia, plains, valleys, hills. Everywhere, on every inch of land, the dark rain clouds were rapidly dissipating. In the vast and mighty river, the shadow of the serpent let out an angry hiss. But from beginning to end, it could not escape the suppression of the Dragon Gate. It could feel its life gradually slipping away. Endless torrential rain, endless disasters, and all the rainwater converged toward Yinzhongjuan under the transportation of the Bifrost. It was as if a pressure relief valve was suddenly opened in a high-pressure container, and all the pressure that could not be released gushed out. Huaishur, the tool man, was the valve itself. Under the gathering of lightning, endless dark clouds once again covered the sky above the endless sea, shrouding the whole world in the shadow of the heavenly palace. In an instant, torrential rain poured down. The torrent was like a waterfall, like the 7 seas breaking the dike. In a short period of time, no gaps could be seen in the thick curtain of rain. The endless rain formed a terrifying high pressure under the push of the Bifrost. Seawater, fresh water, saline alkali water, acid water, aqua regia, weak water, poisonous water, sweet water from the abyss, water from the Styx. Now, the whole Pantheon, every place in the Pantheon was pushing the rain of disasters to this place. Then, in the dark clouds, it turned into a waterfall. At this moment, when a giant pillar-like torrent fell from the clouds, a terrifying disturbance appeared in the endless black tide, and monstrous waves surged from all directions. Under the encirclement of the tens of thousands of feet high raging waves, all the small things were crushed into powder under the ravages of the palms. All the black tide troops that dared to approach White City were crushed in the turbulent waves. But in the raging waves, a behemoth was slowly rising. The ship of bones, Najurfa, was crying out hungrily. In this way, devouring the death of endless allies, the strange monster grew rapidly in the midst of destruction, and the eyes on the huge black sail opened one by one. The blood river lifted it, allowing it to gallop in the wind and fly towards the sky. In the endless blood, one after another, the ship of bones grew out of thin air, emerged, and evolved into an endless fleet of destruction. In the midst of self-destruction and blood, the complete state of the Najilfa fleet was finally born. It was like a coincidence. At that moment, on the throne of the heavenly palace, the sleeping young man raised his eyes and looked down at the mortal world in front of him. He smiled. The monarch of the clouds was born. It seems like there's a new skill. As if he didn't notice the enemy that was rapidly approaching, Huaisha raised his fingers slightly from the armrest and pressed the invisible keys from the air. Then, there was a soul-stirring note bursting out from the heavenly palace. It was just like fate knocking on the door. The heavenly gate opened. Tens of thousands of lightning bolts burst out. Chapter 1078. Even though it was such a dazzling light, it cast the entire world into a dark and gloomy light. The instant the thunder roared, the entire world seemed to be swallowed up by darkness. Only that streak of lightning, which seemed to melt steel, flew out. In an instant, it was above the violent winds and torrential rain, constantly leaping between countless mediums. In a short instant, it extended a long distance like a giant snake, wrapping around the entire fleet. It burned the blood river, leaving behind cracks and burn marks on the sails and bone armor. At the very front, Najilfa's warship suddenly stopped. It let out a sharp cry. A terrifying depression had appeared on the body of his ship. That scar looked like a fist imprint. The blood and bones behind the cracks quickly rolled over and mended themselves. Right in front of the ship's bow, the ferocious ship's bow made of skeletal fingers opened abruptly. The eerie silhouette of the siren raised its head, and its eyes spewed out a murky, bloody light. The mournful light swept across the heavenly palace, leaving behind bloody marks and cracks that constantly corroded it. Behind it, there were even more reborn bone ships that sped up, brazenly crashing into the high wall formed by countless dark clouds outside the palace. The projections that were born and destroyed immediately exploded at the moment of collision, tearing apart the clouds that resembled an iron curtain. Only corpses and bones continued to fall from the sky, accompanied by the colors of the dispersing river of blood. Is one not enough? Huaisha raised his finger again and pressed down. Then 3. Heavenly thunder exhilaration. The 3 thunderbolts that originated from the orchard gem combined into one. Genuine power burst forth from the illusory origin substance, reproducing the terrifying aura that had once been used by the Akalanatha in the past. Collapse of the heavens. Where the rolling thunder spread, everyone's hearts actually skipped a beat. The blood river was like a waterfall, tearing open a massive crack in the middle. The countless bone ship projections were instantly wiped out by this thunder, evaporating. They didn't even have time to be reborn. This time, he didn't even wait for the other side to react. Huaisha flicked his 10 fingers, mercilessly expending the supply of origin substance from the Rainbow Bridge. He swept up a huge amount of rainwater, turning it into a pitch-black cloud. Then, yin and yang clashed within the cloud layer, and lightning flashed. 10, 100, 1,000. It was as if there was no end to it. Dazzling lightning fell from the torrential rain, and when those endless electric lights collided with each other, an ear-piercing sound burst out. Thunder played a melody, and the sea was covered by lightning. What was happening now was a symphony of destruction. This is correction value? Even Huaisha, who was in the palace, could not help but be shocked. Now that he had finally become a true Tier 4 and grasped the destiny of the 4 seasons, he finally experienced the power that only existed in data and records in the past. He felt the existence of the so-called correction value. Just behind him, separated by the 3 major seals, it was as if the endless earth, sky, and thundercloud were responding to this sound from Yinzhongjuan. The blowing of the wind, the sprinkling of rain, the operation of the ocean currents, and even the harsh snowstorm and the frozen frost. Now that the Central Bureau had piled all the correction values and distortions of the changes in the astronomical phenomena over the past few months on him, he seemed to have everything in his hands. Compared to this enormous power, any miracle was pitifully small. At this moment, he seemed to have become a part of the present realm, an extension of the myriad astronomical phenomena. He was the master of hurricanes, rainstorms, frost, and snow. With just a thought, this rich gift from the present realm will be transformed, allowing Yun Zhongjuan's miracles to unfold on a scale hundreds or even thousands of times greater. The domain covered by the dark clouds had expanded to tens of thousands of square kilometers, and it could still continue to extend. Coupled with the supply of origin substance from the Rainbow Bridge, he was the master of all astronomical phenomena, wherever the dark clouds shrouded. If he added, "What about this?" Huaishir raised his head, and a solemn jade crown appeared on his head. Divine mark, crown of national death. What's the reason for the rain? Huaishir chanted softly. Thunder and lightning in the evening. What is there to worry about? In the blink of an eye, the enormous correction value was reduced by a little bit. Then, the sea was turbulent, and the torrential rain roared. It was as if it had a life of its own. Under the power of great Si Ming's sacred mark, all things revolved and turned into a whole. The sea, the rainstorm, the dark clouds, and the violent winds formed a new cycle and merged with Huaishir. Then it gathered in Huaishir's hand, and this endless power was released violently. At this moment, the entire gloomy sky was filled with countless bolts of lightning. The fury from the clouds spilled onto the mortal world, causing waves of destruction. Everything in the world was like dust in front of this horrifying phenomenon. The blood river collapsed, and the traces of nature's fleet were like a small boat in the raging tide under the endless lightning strikes. Huge cracks continued to spread from the bone ship, and behind it, the endless black tide was evaporating at a speed visible to the naked eye. This is level 4. At the front of the wall of White City Fortress, Yanqinga turned his head stiffly and looked at Xiongqi beside him. He was confused. "You're telling me that this is level 4? If he is level 4, then what am I?" Xiongqi was silent for a long time. Then he patted his old partner's shoulder sympathetically. "Probably a piece of trash." Yanqinga's old blood was stuck in his throat, and he almost cried out. Xiongqi sighed and comforted him earnestly. "Don't always compare yourself with others. Think positively. At least you're a level 5, right?" This was the final blow that killed the camel. Yanqinga turned his head away, and tears of sadness rushed out in the storm. Damn it, why? In the distant sky, the thunder did not stop. In the continuous roar, the screams from nature's fleet were getting louder and louder. Under the continuous lightning strikes, the ship that was riddled with holes was being reborn. It was getting bigger and more ferocious. The blood river continued. On the black sail, countless pupils were trembling, quickly splitting and merging. In the end, it was hard to tell how many crazy pupils were gathered on it. Every eye reflected the lightning in the sky, as well as the heavenly steel tower above the clouds. A look of hatred and greed appeared on his face. It had already rushed into the sky again, dragging countless corpses that had not been digested in time. Like a huge octopus, it spasmed and danced, crashing through the storm and lightning in front of it. This time, countless bolts of lightning struck its body, but only left a shallow burn mark, and then bounced off like rainwater. In an instant, it pierced through the dark clouds and smashed into the heavenly palace. The heavenly palace made a loud noise, and dozens of cracks appeared. But on the outer layer, 100,000 zhang tall wall was erected again in the dark clouds. There are 9 layers to the circle. Who can measure them? Huaishir waved his hand, stabilizing the turbulent heavenly palace, and sent down lightning again. But this time, it could no longer cause any damage. It evolved. As it swallowed the Nager battleship that was born from the destruction, it was also constantly increasing its resistance to various types of attacks. Now, it had already developed resistance to overly ordinary destruction and destruction. After the lightning had almost completely destroyed it, it had gradually become familiar with Yun Zhongjuan's attacks, and its damage reduction had reached a terrifying level. Huaishir was slightly stunned, but he heard a mocking sneer coming from the illusion. That was the last remnant from the dead water. If Ing Fangzhou was here, he would definitely scoff at this. Resistance? Defense? Rebirth? Was it useful? It would only increase laughter. Back then, ever since Ing Fangzhou used his only large group of kunpangs to create Yun Zhongjuan's heavenly palace, his favorite opponent was this kind of tough opponent. The tougher, the better. There was nothing else insignificant in his heavenly palace. In a complicated structure that was like a catalyst, there were only countless electrodes that constantly stimulated pure lightning. He invested his own source substance and spirit, and did not hesitate to fuse the lightning with his soul. Everything was to serve the same purpose, and that was to use the purest and most decisive method to completely annihilate all enemies. If everything was one, then this one was enough. There was no need for anything else. In this way, the lightning could be endlessly purified. The longer they fought against him, the more violent the lightning that was imbued with origin substance would become. Its destructive power would increase exponentially until it was able to destroy all opponents in front of it before it was destroyed by this frightening power. Only with enough purity could it be strong enough. Huaishir was completely unable to apply this experience from his ancestors. In Ing Fangzhou's eyes, his abilities and blessings that were so heterogeneous that he sometimes couldn't sort them out were completely a typical example of not doing proper work. He should be reborn under the Iron Fist. Unfortunately, the times had changed. How could destruction be compared to creation? Since the quality is insufficient, then let's use quantity to win. Huaishir smiled slightly and raised his eyes to look at the massive creature charging towards him. As a wooden dummy, there's nothing more suitable than this, right? In that instant, he waved his finger. It was as if he had issued an order. He told it, "Go back." Boom! A pale wave of chi suddenly burst forth from the sky. Fierce winds blew, and Najurfa flew backwards. The massive ship shook violently, and a terrible crack appeared on the black sail. Countless eyes were torn apart by this sudden attack. At the stern of the ship, on the collapsed bone deck, hot steam slowly rose from the torrential rain. Gradually, a silhouette that had flown out from the heavenly palace appeared. It was a long mace with distinct edges and corners. Under the entanglement of the waves, it emitted a dark blue light. The weight of the 7 seas descended here. This pure mass instantly pierced through the ship's bow and tore through the sails. After destroying countless defenses, it wedged itself deeply into the stern of the ship. Immediately after, it disappeared. Then, the heavenly palace opened again. Flames reignited in the furnace. Nemo's engine ran at full power, causing the rebuilt Twilight Village to rumble. A terrifying gravitational force burst forth from it. In the turbulent tides, the broken bones that sank in the blood were pulled by the gravitational force of the ultimate. They slowly rose into the sky and disappeared into the endless dark clouds. Then, under the refinement of the furnace, for pure steel, in the inner part of the heavenly palace, production began again. Casting the body, integration of disaster, transformation of shadow and substance, engraving of secret instruments, filling of source substances as the correction value plummeted. Border relics were produced in batches from the assembly line, leaving all the alchemists dumbfounded. At this moment, Huaishir raised his finger again, and the torrential rain came to an abrupt end. Countless border relics hung high in the dissipating dark clouds. Like stars cast in iron, they glowed with dazzling light in the dark sky. Under the illumination of the cold iron light, Najurfa's gallop came to an abrupt halt and froze in midair. The blood river was disturbed and convulsed in horror. Heaven-style horizontal, death of Yangli. In this way, under the power of the miraculous engraving, the countless weapons were endowed with the final blessing. Next, please let me take a look. Huaishir whispered expectantly. How long can the resistance you're so proud of last? The crisp sound of fingers snapping spread in the silent sky. The torrent descended. Chapter 1079. After the rainstorm dissipated, the sky was filled with iron lights that hung high in the sky, like stars. Najerfa was not the only one who felt suffocated. After looking through the mirror, every pupil involuntarily trembled slightly in the face of this unbelievable scale. When the observation program displayed the results of the calculation in front of every face, everyone could no longer hold back the urge to inhale a mouthful of cold air. They even felt a little out of breath, a total of 64,664 swords. And it was still increasing, and increasing. A super-large alchemy workshop, a grand master, hundreds of alchemists, and thousands of apprentices. It was a number that might not be completed even if they spent a whole year. At this moment, it was floating in the sky. Under the harsh magnification of the lenses, a flawless outline was revealed. Every single one of the swords was filled with pure, killing intent. Flawless. Was this some kind of F*King advertisement for a large-scale alchemy workshop? Even Jaeger had forgotten his angina for a moment. He lay in front of the screen with his eyes wide open. He could not help but clench his fists and wanted to curse. Mother ***, how much did the Stone Cauldron Academy cost? My bureau paid twice. Wait, why are we paying? The feeling of pain once again emerged from the bottom of his heart. Super double. Blood pressure, my blood pressure. Now, accompanied by the rise of the most painful blood pressure in the world, the endless iron rainstorm fell on the mortal world. What he heard was the whistling of the iron rainstorm. All he could see was the countless mercury-like flashes of light forming a curtain of rain. It was so thick and so sharp, as if the whole world was stuffed into a paper shredder. With the rotation of the bearings and the ravaging of the blades, everything was cut into extremely thin strips. What flowed out from the cracks was only scarlet blood. Destruction seemed to have become so cheap. Like a rainstorm, the bizarre gift of buy one get 10 free descended on the black tide and swallowed everything. The screams and roars were torn apart by the sound of the iron rainstorm. It was difficult to hear clearly. At this moment, between the gloomy sky and the sea, there was only blood. It was as if the stingy monsters were overproducing and unwilling to give it away for free. The blood was continuously sprinkled into the sea by the stingy monsters, dyeing the sea a disgusting dark red. The sound of bones rubbing against each other came from the deep sea. The heavily injured Nadril was trembling violently. The hull of the ship was covered with piercing steel. Axes, swords, hammers, and spears were falling from the sky. Countless destructive methods had completely torn apart the entire keel and deck. It was split into two from the middle. But now, amidst Najerfa's mournful roar, the white bone warship rose from the depths of the sea. Then it trembled and fell once more under the bombardment of the iron rain. Loud noises erupted one after another. It seemed to be endless. Under Yun Zhongjuan's control, the sharpness and quality of the iron continued to transform into terrifying lethality. Even a battle fortress would be completely smashed under the terrifying attack of this sky-based weapon. It was as if a fruit had been thrown into a fruit juice machine. Under the crazy slashing of the blade, there were countless cracks from the beginning to the end. In the end, it actually made people wonder, how could it still have a silhouette after such a terrifying attack? After witnessing such a tenacious struggle, all the spectators couldn't help but have a subtle acknowledgement of this unyielding character. Come on, big brother who drives a black ship. Stand up. It was as if they had heard countless cheers and cheers. The dead warship reassembled from the bones and climbed up from the endless blood and wreckage, even though it had shrunk by a whole circle. But then, the bone armor continued to collapse under the piercing and attacks of the iron rain. The scarlet eyes exploded into pulp. Look at that miserable appearance, everyone. In the fallen country, the withered king sneered. This is the vanguard army of our fallen country? Nadril, whom we had high hopes for, is now being ravaged by a broken ship that has sunk for 70 years, like a rat man who only knows how to scream. What you have offered, the opening ceremony that I have been looking forward to for so long, is it really such a funny thing? In the dead silence, only the sound of kneeling could be heard. All the crowned people in the hall were prostrating on the ground, trembling. Even the rulers on both sides of the hall had gloomy expressions. They lowered their eyes without saying a word. And this disappointment from the Supreme Being was undoubtedly transmitted to Najurfa. It caused this relic of authority that had just been reborn to let out an angry roar. From the layers of seawater that had broken open, black-purple flames suddenly spread and swept out. Suddenly, the deformed ship, the wriggling monster-like shell, and even the countless teeth, nails, and deformed organs in the armor rapidly split open from the middle. Like an onion peeling off layer by layer, the core of the ship was revealed, the shadow under the keel. It was a statue that was soaked in thick blood. The rotten wood carved out a hunched and curled figure. The ugly body was covered in scars and lumps of wood. Countless cracks shrouded it, for withered arms covered its face, wriggling in the stench as if it was wailing. Then, the face hidden under the four arms suddenly lifted up and faced the falling stars. The ugly face hidden under the palms and the malice that had accumulated for countless years gushed out. A shrill scream drowned out all other sounds. It vented this malice and hatred to its heart's content. When the single eye that looked like it was weeping blood was raised, all of the pain and suffering it suffered, right now, turned tangible, locking onto Heaven Palace's location. In the sky, full of iron rain, there was suddenly an extremely fine line of bleak white that rose, going against the iron light, rising into the sky. In an instant, it entered Heaven Palace. Then, a collapsing rumble echoed through the heavens. Under that line of light, Heaven Palace shook intensely, cracking sounds continuously erupting. Countless cracks and wounds appeared out of thin air on Heaven Palace that had just been created. Those were the wounds originally left on Nadril's body. All of the damage Nadril suffered was entrusted to this strand of resentment light. Humiliation, pain, wounds, and even death, everything Huaishur inflicted on him was completely returned at this moment. Dozens of cracks suddenly appeared on Huaishur's body. Blood seeped out, bone deep. The lightning and dark clouds quickly dissipated. The huge Heaven Palace was rapidly collapsing and collapsing. But in contrast, the white-boned ship in the Blood River was instantly restored to its complete state. At this moment, the blood tide surged. Nadril brazenly smashed through the broken Heaven Palace. Countless steel fragments fell from the sky and fell into the sea. Quickly dissolving into shadows of nothingness, blood had already covered Heaven Palace. Layers of defenses shattered and collapsed. Behind the high walls, Nadril advanced with irresistible force, fiercely destroying everything along the way. He tore apart the last defense. Countless crimson eyes opened on the ship, glaring at Huaishur with venomous hatred. He was close at hand. Behind the unfolded hull, in the deepest part of the darkness, the hunched and deformed wooden sculpture smiled sinisterly and reached out to Huaishur, eager to make him a part of his body. On the broken throne, Huaishur was also looking at him. "Hello." Yun Zhongjuan calmly raised his eyes and told him, "I have a friend who I want to introduce to you." He raised his blood-stained finger again and pointed at the enemy who was close at hand. Snap! The crisp snap of the finger was covered by the loud noise from the deepest part of Heaven Palace. Under the cracked heavenly palace, a shadow so huge that it made one's hair stand on end quickly rose. The steel warship full of cracks leaped out from the iron light and shadow and was being reforged inch by inch. Suddenly, behind Huaishur, the phantom of the Kingdom of Heaven's warship appeared out of thin air and brazenly collided with Nadril's hull. The cracked hull closed like a big mouth full of sharp teeth. Then, the creepy chewing sound burst out again, accompanied by the screams of the sculpture. Blood gushed out from the cracks of Heaven Palace like a torrent. In the sky, in the wind, in the deep sea, and in the bones, the relics of the border that were scattered as disposable ammunition quickly dissipated and turned into nothingness. Shadows flew up out of thin air and flowed into the ultimate. Then, they returned to Heaven Palace and reforged all the cracks. Under the catalysis of the casting technique, the activated Heaven Palace began to shrink inwards like a monster. Countless sharp teeth bit and tore apart the bones. They hungrily swallowed the blood and greedily gnawed on the enemy's body. Gradually, their original appearance was restored. In the end, in the scarlet sky that filled the entire sky, between the flowing source substances, the steel monster spewed out flames ignited by pain and anger. It once again rose above the wind and height. The monster that was once created by countless hatred was reborn here. The kingdom of heavens worship Nautilus. When the hatred that turned into dark flames was reignited, the whole world was swallowed by a bone-piercing chill. The blood river collapsed under the monster's ravaging, and Nadril, who was struggling to fall, was once again swallowed by the black shadow that descended from the sky. The Nemo engine operated beyond the limit, endlessly spurring on this miracle. Thunder, frost, and torrential rain wrapped around Nautilus's body. Together with it, they launched a terrible ravaging and torture on the enemy, colliding, crushing, tearing, and devouring. Without the main cannon, it spat out endless iron light. Without missiles, it struck down destructive thunder. Riding the wind and torrential rain, it galloped above the sky and reappeared its former ferocity. When the dormant ferocity awakened once again, it would not stop until there was enough blood and death to feast on. Now, the power to annihilate hell had appeared in front of hell. Under the shadow of the sword of the war god and the rotting dragon, above them, at the edge of the battle, and even at the core of the battle, the berserk monster chased after its prey without any scruples. Even the battle between natural enemies and rulers could not separate them. Huge bone fragments and blood fell from the sky like torrential rain. Nadril struggled with all his might, and the huge ship suddenly collapsed. Countless bones flew into the air, submerged into the blood river, and reassembled from the other side. But this time, when the battleship that was riddled with holes reappeared, it was no longer as ferocious and berserk as before. Instead, it seemed to be trembling. The black sails swelled in fear, continuously absorbing the blood water. The huge bow of the ship finally turned, towards the direction it had come from. At this moment, in the great hall of the fallen kingdom, everyone's expression suddenly changed amidst the deathly silence, because the mocking smile on the Wither King's face gradually disappeared, replaced by indescribable disappointment and disdain. Facing such a war and a powerful enemy, facing such adversity and a time to counterattack, it actually wanted to escape? How shameful! Ring the bell of destruction, awaken the mourners, send the wounded beast and corpse butterflies up, and after killing that disgraceful thing, launch the attack. The Wither King expressionlessly waved his hand and gave the final order. Then he stood up, no longer looking at the projection in front of him, and only gave a cold warning. All of you, take care of yourselves. For a moment, everyone in the great hall respectfully lowered their heads and replied in unison. The gates of the kingdom opened once again, and in the depths of the blood river, a huge shadow quickly swam towards the reality. Beside it, countless giant butterflies formed from blood spread their wings and scattered scale powder of annihilation. And behind the two rulers were countless armies of hell. Driven by the fury of their fallen kingdom, they charged towards the reality. At that moment, the Withered King's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. In the projection, there was an earth-shattering boom. It didn't just come from the reality. Countless borders, and even all the depths, could be heard as if something was about to collapse. Regardless of whether it was the veins of the fallen kingdom's blood river or Golden Dawn's stairway to hell, all of them began to tremble violently, countless cracks appearing. The tides of the depths came to an abrupt halt because the borders were expanding. What's that? The white snake looked up in shock. As the three seals were activated, in the depths of the reality, the three pillars of spirit marrow, transformation, and origin substance were rapidly moving, opening up a brand new domain. Outwards. Immediately afterwards, countless stars slowly rose from the depths of the reality. The frozen bridge, the boneyard, the white snow plains, gloom city, rusty ruins. In the depths of the reality, countless flames lit up. As keys were inserted and turned, the outpost that had once been buried in hell, after a long period of silence, once again burst out with dazzling light. Towards the reality, towards hell, towards each other. Just above the border defense line, a crack suddenly appeared in the dark clouds, followed by a second crack. The seals formed by countless hells were rapidly collapsing, because the power of the reality was expanding. Amidst the joyous songs and cries of the departed souls, the silent outposts once again activated the circuits and connections between each other, leading this long-lost power to rush between hells, once again enveloping them in its embrace. Returning to the source. At this moment, in the decision-making room, Jaeger, who had been restraining his emotions all this time, finally couldn't help but clench his fists and shout fanatically, his messy white hair falling from his forehead. Under the push of the Rainbow Bridge, countless borders were expanding outwards, towards deeper depths, causing the three sealed domains to extend towards hell. The waves that were enough to contend against the deep tides spread out, easily tearing apart the Blood River, collapsing the Heaven Ladder, and pushing away all the behemoths along the way. The furious dragon of decay on the endless sea was suddenly squeezed by this sudden force, turning into a pile of meat paste, and completely flew out of the defense line. Even a behemoth like a fallen kingdom couldn't help but fly back in this sudden wave. On the outer shell of hell, cracks appeared. Wherever the light passed, more than half of the depth zone, within 30 depth zone, the entire infernal realm was enveloped within the boundary of the border defense line. At this moment, the territory of the reality was shrouded in the abyss, covering the battlefield and tearing apart all the enemy's paths. After a long period of patience, the resistance from the reality finally began. When the blood color from the other side faded away on the endless sea, Njurfa's huge hull was thrown out again, smashing into the black tide. Under the Nautilus's overlooking gaze, a ripple of horror was set off. At this moment, the cold iron light spread from the sky again. Under the transformation of the casting furnace, countless corpses quickly turned into sharp blades in the dark clouds, aiming at the enemies below. Torrential rain fell again. No gap was left, no blind spots were left. Yun Zhongjuan's anger and the Nautilus's hatred burst out from the sky, once again pushing everything to destruction. Under the iron rain, Njurfa hissed and struggled to devour a large group of corpses around him. With great difficulty, it recovered again, wanting to turn back and fight to the death. However, when it rose again, there was no longer any metal rain in the sky. Between the sea and the sky, above the Nautilus, only Yun Zhongjuan looked down indifferently. Above his head, in the empty space, only ominous dark clouds kept gathering and spreading. Flames and lightning surged in the huge furnace, gradually forming a frightening and ferocious silhouette. It was like the crown of the sky. Do you see that? What's cutting off your retreat is the border that was once drawn by the utopia. Huaisher looked at the brilliance of countless outposts. He stretched out his hand, as if he was holding an invisible sword hilt, and aimed at the bone ship, the black tide, and even the endless sea below. Finally, he announced to the enemy in front of him, "Now, please bear witness to the monument they left behind." At that moment, when the invisible sharp blade slashed down, the dark clouds above the sky split open a crack that stretched for dozens of miles. Countless lightning and flames sprinkled down from it, illuminating everything in the darkness. But at this moment, no one cared about those insignificant flames and lightning. In the storm that burst out of thin air, a mountain-like sword slowly stretched out from the dark crack and fell toward the mortal world. It was hard to imagine how many corpses and deaths were needed to transform into a weapon of such a scale, and how many terrifying furnaces and flames were needed to temper it, to forge such a solemn blade. There was no hilt or guard, Under the shroud of the hurricane and flames, the mountain-like sword blade was burned red. Like a meteorite, it pierced through the narrow gap between the sky and the sword of the sea and stabbed down toward the battlefield. Everything was shrouded in darkness. On the mountain-like ridge of the sword, under the burning of the flames and lightning, fragments were constantly peeling off. Rows and rows of densely packed carvings quickly appeared. Those were names. Countless names. All those who had been sacrificed. All those who had sacrificed themselves to stop the deep backflow. All the names that were still recorded in the Book of Destiny. Their experiences of fighting, the battlefields of death, and even their final decisions were all recorded on this enormous sword. Their sacrifice, their hatred, their anger, and their returned souls were all accompanied by this sword, slashing toward hell. Endless lightning, endless molten fire, freezing frost, surging tides, and even violent rain, all the natural phenomena and disasters were overshadowed by this soul-forged sword. At this moment, between the sea and the sky, there was only this one blazing light in front of everyone's eyes. No one heard the shrill screams. No one cared about Najurfa's struggle and escape, and no one cared about the spasms and surges of the black tide. The moment the monument of the Republic descended from the sky, everything was enveloped in a dazzling light. There was no way to escape. The waves of the tens of thousands of feet high retreated in all directions in horror, but they quickly evaporated under the terrifying impact, along with the trembling black tide and the endless army. The storm blew and rushed into the sky, blowing away all the haze and blood, causing a ray of light to shine down from the crack in the sky. Tearing through the storm and tides, penetrating the deep ocean, the straight sword body stretched down until it was deeply nailed into the rock layer that extended from the foundation of White City Fortress. And Najurfa had long disappeared. Under the slash of the sword blade, he completely collapsed. However, this time, he no longer had the chance to be reborn and rise again. The burning blade had already engulfed all of the death. The tragic screams gradually dissipated in the flames, and the huge bone warship had been completely melted into the steel. On the sword body, there was an incomplete outline that kept struggling, trying to escape, but in the end, it could only leave a vague outline in vain, becoming an insignificant decoration among the countless scratches on the sword body. It witnessed the glory of the past. Now, you have enough time to slowly appreciate it, Huaishir said softly and looked forward. Now, when the light from the homeland shone down from the sky, the countless names on the sword body glowed with a golden brilliance. It was just like a real monument. In the long silence, no one dared to speak in the palace of the fallen nation. At this moment, everyone lowered their heads deeply, trying their best to hide their existence. They did not even dare to sweat, holding their breaths tightly. When a sovereign's fury erupted, even breathing was a sin that could cause one's body to be crushed to pieces. However, there was no ferocious fury as they had expected, nor was there a cold majesty that they had feared. In this silence, the withered king stood on the spot and quietly watched the scene in the projection, staring at the monument that seemed to connect the heavens to the earth. After a long while, his shoulders trembled, then trembled again. Ha ha, ha ha ha. As if all the disappointment and anger had been swept away, the withered king and the withered king looked at the scene and could not help but laugh loudly. It was so happy. They even wholeheartedly offered their applause and praise for such a result. Your Majesty, why are you laughing? Under the heavy steps of the throne, someone mustered the courage to carefully look up, but did not dare to peek at the sovereign's face. They could only see the withered king's personal guards and ministers beside the throne, as well as the sovereign's joyful expressions. It was as if the fallen nation had not suffered a crushing defeat, but had instead won a great victory. It was even more joyful than that, more anticipation. Do you see? My subordinates. The withered king laughed loudly, turned around and asked, after such a short separation, those troublesome fellows in the Utopia are still alive, and there are still such opponents in the present. Isn't this great news? That's true. The subordinates knelt on the ground and responded respectfully. The cheers converged like a tide and echoed in the huge fallen nation. Very good, very good. Such an opponent is really gratifying. The withered king pointed at Yun Zhongjuan's face in the projection and ordered the hound under him. Look at him carefully, Gala. As my loyal hound, remember that appearance and that face in your heart. From now on, he is my enemy. It was different from the excitement and fighting spirit of the fallen nation. When the cheers and joy in the decision-making room finally came to an end, everyone looked at Jaeger's pale face and the empty medicine bottle beside him. The atmosphere gradually calmed down. Is it over? The Secretary General, whose heart was suffering, asked softly. Everyone silently exchanged glances with each other, and they were actually a little uncertain. Grand idea? Maybe? Maybe? Who could have predicted what would happen next? But no matter what, the prelude to this war of the worlds had officially come to an end. But when everything finally came to an end for the time being, and he could breathe a sigh of relief, Jaeger's expression became more and more blank. He held the tablet in front of him and repeatedly checked all the correction values that Huaishur had taken away. He repeatedly calculated and refreshed them. But no matter how he looked at it, the result was only the simplest number. 0. It was gone. It was all F*King gone. 17% of the correction value. Over the past few months, the results of all the weather adjustments around the world, plus the inventory from the Central Bureau, which was enough to shake the entire world, were gone. Even if it was all burned during the advancement, it would not be possible. Moreover, he clearly saw that Huaishur did not use that much at all. Of such a large amount of correction value, he squandered less than 5% during the advancement and battle. But what about the rest? Just thinking about such a huge gap made Jaeger's brain repeatedly jump on the verge of collapse. Where are all the correction values? The Secretary General knocked on the table and asked angrily, "Check it out. Where did all the correction values go? Let those bastards' celestial genealogy know when to stop. It's fine if they took the Central Bureau's correction value for nothing, but they can't pack it up and take it away. Ahem, about that. Maybe there's no need to check." In the corner of the command center, Creator Shar, who had been calmly drinking tea from beginning to end, finally put down his teacup. After coughing twice, he pointed at the screen. He said, "It should all be there." Jaeger suddenly turned around. He was stunned. He just subconsciously straightened his body and held his breath. At this moment, under the observation mirror of the command bureau, specks of dreamy light slowly rose from the endless sea. Beside Huaishur, in front of the monument that pierced through the sea and the sky, the returning souls rose from the Nautilus. After exhausting this hard-won miracle and power, washing away the distortion deep in their souls, and freeing themselves from the solidification that entangled their will, the departed souls bathed in the brilliance from the realm of reality and slowly rose. After 70 years of suffering and fighting, after a long wait and sacrifice, they finally bid farewell to hell. Standing in front of their homes, they turned around and took one last look at the world in front of them and everything that they once loved. A silent farewell. Just like that, under everyone's gazes, the heroes of the past followed the call of the Silver Sea and embarked on their final journey home. They never looked back. They were going home. In the distant sound of the tide, Huaishur raised his head and witnessed the light of their departure, until the last glimmer of light disappeared. He smiled and said goodbye softly. "Goodbye, everyone." Chapter 1080. Half an hour ago, when everything had just begun, London, the Astronomical Society Center building. Unlike the busy decision-making room and command center, the lounge on the top floor was quiet. This was originally a place for the representatives to rest for a short while, but London was attacked, and the Battle of the Worlds started so hastily, so the lounge was not as noisy as it used to be. Only in the corner, a few elderly people were sitting at the table, basking in the sun. Zoroastrian genealogy, Frozen Sea genealogy, Celtic genealogy, Assyrian genealogy, Scylla genealogy. Representatives from various small genealogies or regions were drinking tea and coffee. They could faintly hear the noise in the conference room in the distance. When they talked to each other, they could not help but smile bitterly. In the huge storm, there was also a slightly quiet corner. Those who had no hope of getting on the stage and were not important did not want to stay on the scene to accompany others. Instead, they came to the lounge with some kind of escape tacit understanding, trying to temporarily escape from the complicated situation and the pressure of reality during a short break. In the silence, there was the sound of the door opening. "Everyone is here." Russell, who was late, walked in briskly. After leaving the medical room, he pretended to put a Band-Aid on his forehead to show his hard work and sacrifice when facing the ruler. He held the copper pipe and waved to the few people beside the table. "Can anyone lend me a light?" "Mr. Russell, you're here too?" The old man in front of the table turned around and was slightly surprised. "Yeah, aren't you guys here too?" Russell pulled a chair and sat down. He found a more comfortable position and asked knowingly, "Can't you stay in the conference room? It's too hard." The old man shook his head, causing the few people beside him to nod helplessly. "Yeah, it's really hard." Russell sighed softly. Seeing everyone's confidence and enthusiasm, I can't help but feel ashamed and helpless when I look back at my own inaction. Celestial genealogy isn't going to get involved. The middle-aged man with slightly dark skin asked, "Who doesn't want to get involved?" "Unfortunately, I don't have that much capital." Russell smoked his cigar and thought of his students who were still in the abyss. After a moment of silence, he smiled bitterly and said, "I'm just a small man, and there are many things waiting to be done. I'm afraid I won't be able to make it this time. Let's wait a few more years. Isn't there a Mr. Huaisher from the new generation who's pretty good?" "Him? You're still too young. Train for a few more years." Russell waved his hand and said humbly, "There will be plenty of opportunities for young people to shine in the future. Didn't the Frozen Sea lineage also nurture a Lady of Storms?" I've been hesitating recently whether or not I should let Laura accept the recruitment and appointment of the Command Bureau. The bearded man, whose skin was full of traces of sun and frost, shook his head and sighed. "I can't limit the future of the children because of my own selfishness. But when I look back and see the expectations left behind by the deceased teachers, I feel that I'm so useless that I can't even keep the seeds. How embarrassing is that? Young people always have their own choices. Why don't you ask her? Besides, even if she's in the Command Bureau, she's still a member of the Frozen Sea lineage, isn't she?" Russell said a few words of comfort, and the other party just nodded slightly and continued to drink his whiskey. Everyone was just complaining to each other. They didn't expect a few words to solve the problem. In the face of the Command Bureau's expanding and increasing power, any small lineage would intuitively feel the decline of their own influence and resources. If they didn't work hard to make some achievements, they might not have enough correction points to maintain one day. Even the inherited source books and the authority left behind by their ancestors would have to be sheltered under the roof of the Astronomical Association. When that time came, they would lose their independence and simply become a subsidiary of the Astronomical Association, existing in name only. Even if they had a fierce tiger in their heart, they would be limited by their own ability and foundation, unable to do anything. Or they might as well be lying flat: materials, education, sourcebooks, miracles, alchemy, funds. In order to revitalize a lineage, there were countless things needed, but there were also risks and sacrifices. Under the shadow of the Astronomical Association, in the cracks of the P5, not everyone had Russell's luck to be able to grasp the good cards left behind by their predecessors. Also, not everyone had Russell's determination to restore the glory of the past at all costs. Now, when the curtain was slowly lifted, everyone could only sit below the stage and watch the important characters shine on the stage. But happiness and sadness were other people's and never had anything to do with them. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to sit here and bask in the sun at this time. They could only hope that in the coming days, there would be a chance to stand out and win. Otherwise, decline would be a distant and inevitable result. There's still a long way to go. There's no need to rush. Luo Su took a puff of his cigarette and comforted, "Who knows? Maybe a big surprise will suddenly appear in front of you, right? You have to have hope. Then I'll count on your auspicious words. The representative of the frozen sea lineage raised his glass slightly and drank it. Thanks to Russell's explanation and comfort, the slightly dull and gloomy atmosphere in the lounge disappeared without a trace. Those who had no fate with the stage quietly basked in the sun and tasted tea and wine in this warm afternoon. When everyone looked at the world outside the window, they spontaneously felt a sense of identity as they hugged each other for warmth in the wind and rain. Wasn't this what friends were like? They had to have been in the same situation before they could understand each other. In this subtle and relaxed atmosphere, they reached a lot of cooperation intentions and consensus. It wasn't a waste of time. When the cheers and noise downstairs finally reached upstairs, the short break came to an end. Looks like it's over. Russell raised his eyes slightly and looked downstairs, as well as the joy on the faces of the people running in the corridor. Yes. The person next to him nodded. It seems to be a good result. Then let's go back. Russell got up, put out the fire of the cigarette, and smiled. We have to offer applause and cheers for the heroes. No matter what, it was time to go back. However, when they walked out of the door and came to the corridor, they noticed the strange expressions of the people around them. That kind of strange look of shock and doubt gradually made everyone at a loss. Quite a number of people actually took the initiative to nod their heads in acknowledgement. What's going on? Someone asked in confusion. Did we miss something? It can't be a big deal, right? Russell walked in front and answered indifferently. What is it? We'll know when we go back. Did we suddenly become the protagonists? This joke made everyone laugh out loud. After shaking their heads, they ignored such a ridiculous guess and walked in the direction of the central conference room of the decision-making room. However, the further they went, the more they could feel the strange atmosphere. The reverence in many people's eyes was as if they were not a group of representatives who skipped work to drink tea, but heroes who returned from a journey. And why everyone seemed to be looking at him. Russell's heart sank, and he suddenly had a strange guess. This familiar feeling of being cheated. He subconsciously took out his phone, and before he could see the messages that were piling up on the screen in silent mode, he heard countless cheers after the door opened. The unprecedented, enthusiastic applause was like a wave coming in their faces, causing them to be stunned in place. In this jubilant atmosphere, these bewildered and confused expressions made them seem like intruders who didn't fit in at all. They couldn't understand what was going on at all. But before they could react, they saw the team, led by the 5 major lineages, walk up. At the front, the skinny old man was stunned for a moment. Before he could say anything, he subconsciously squeezed out a smile and wanted to reach out his hand, but Feathered Serpent casually patted his shoulder and pushed him away. Then, she went straight to Russell, who was quietly at the back. She grabbed both of his hands. Brilliant, really brilliant. Feathered Serpent did not hide her admiration and admiration. I'm afraid only Mimir can come up with such a strange plan, right? Luo Su. This time, everyone has been ruthlessly tricked by you. Yes, the Archbishop congratulated him. I didn't expect celestial genealogy to have such a foundation and ability. It's really amazing. Such courage and bravery, as expected of the successor of a utopia. A series of praises and compliments surrounded the dumbfounded old bastard. In this chaotic situation, he subconsciously glanced at Mystic Bird, who was not far away, holding a teacup and watching the show. What the hell? What's going on? What the hell is going on? Why don't I know anything? The old man raised his eyebrows slightly as if he had understood something, and his expression instantly became very interesting. However, his lips opened and closed silently, and he mouthed the key words to help him out. Why, sure, in an instant, Russell's little hand trembled, and his heart skipped a beat. His eyes subconsciously darted around a few times, and after not seeing any obituary, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Then, under everyone's respectful and passionate gazes, that slightly dull expression seamlessly connected with some kind of ambiguous and mysterious smile. It was as if he was holding the pearl of wisdom and had a card up his sleeve. Aya, you flatter me. Russell waved his hand reservedly and inadvertently touched the Book of Destiny in his arms. It's just a small matter. I'm just doing my part. Aya, I watched that child Huaisha grow up. He has been promising since he was young, and now he has finally made some modest achievements. As his teacher, I'm really honored. Aya, celestial genealogy has always been like this. We suffer first and enjoy later. As the saying goes, we are willing to sacrifice and contribute. There's nothing to say. This is our duty. There's no reason to spread it everywhere. Everyone look at me. Am I not very normal? I'm used to it. I've long been used to it. Thus, he skillfully touched the feathered serpent's hand and shook it vigorously. Although he didn't understand what was going on, it was right to act cool. However, when he turned around and saw his little friends who were lying flat together with him, he couldn't help but smile crookedly. Sorry, I was just talking nonsense. Everyone, please don't take it to heart. It was just like the dog in class who said every day that he went home to play games but got full marks at the end of the semester. When he held a script and went on stage to speak, he revealed a simple smile that could make countless people below the stage grit their teeth. People still have to be motivated. Look, as long as you work hard, there will always be gains. You have to have hope in your heart. Right? 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 Finally, he waved his hand and said goodbye to the brothers who he had just met. Russell turned around and joyfully hugged the enthusiastic applause. Friends? No more friends. At the same time, in hell, in the deepest part of the dark abyss. Excuse me, have you seen my friend? Fu Cangguang held the photo in his hand and showed it to the grotesque hell creature in front of him. She's lost. This is the one, small, wearing a white dress, about this tall. He gestured at the position of his chest and looked at the monster in front of him with anticipation. She should have just passed by here a few days ago. Do you still remember? Under the thunderous roar, the monster that had long been turned into charcoal twitched and twitched. It glared at the lunatic with grief and indignation in its eyes. Finally, it breathed its last. Dead. In silence, Fu Cangguang got up helplessly, turned around, and looked at the corpse-strewn hell behind him. He couldn't help but look up at the sky and sigh in a daze. I can't make it in time. That no-show. Where did she go? Chapter 1081. Name: Huaisha. Gender: male. Age: 19. Inspection complete. There are no errors. Confirmation of appointment. Clearance granted. In front of the quaint door, a stiff voice said to Russell, "Welcome to the Astronomy Club, Mr. Huaisha." Yes, I did feel it. Russell adjusted his tie and nodded at the inspection program. Thank you. Then, after the door opened, he saw Jaeger's sour face in the office. It was as if he had worked overtime for half a year without a vacation, slept less than 4 hours a day, and had to face endless trouble. No, it was no longer as if. It should be said that it was. Seeing the old man walk in, Jaeger couldn't help but want to rub his face. I say, can't you just follow the procedures? This manual secretary was only installed 2 days ago. You can change it after only 2 days. Isn't that better? Russell calmly sat on Jaeger's favorite recliner and even turned around. He glanced at his old friend's twitching face and said, "Some programs exist to prove that they are shit. Look at the things you guys have created. Origin substance identification, voice identification, soul identification. What's the point of doing so many things? The purpose of a program is to follow it, even if, okay, sometimes it's a pile of shit, but it's still better than being worse than a pile of shit." Jaeger took off his reading glasses, applied 2 drops of eye drops, and rubbed his numb face. Okay, come on. Tell me, what surprise did you prepare for me? What did you guys do this time? Look at you. It's as if we won't go out if we don't do something. Russell's eyes widened in surprise. The celestial genealogy has always maintained the safety and interests of the present realm. We never run amok. That's right, that's right. The utopia is law-abiding, adaptable, and innovative. As long as there's an astronomy meeting, there'll be no worries in the present world. Everyone will have a bright future, okay? Jaeger was too lazy to argue with him. He asked directly, "What are you doing here? Didn't I ask you about the situation?" Russell chuckled and asked without any shame. "Everything is on the bulletin board. If you want to know, you can go to the bulletin board or install the Tomorrow News app. Those bastards published it half an hour before us." Bulletin board? Tomorrow's news? If I believe in those things, I might as well take a stroll in your lounge. To be honest, as long as there's whiskey and cigars, some members of the decision-making room will lower their guard to a terrifying degree. Russell shook his head unconcernedly. "You know what I want to hear, Jaeger? It's not those pompous words, nor is it a victory report used to coax children. It's the real situation." Jaeger was silent for a long time and stared at him. Finally, he could not help but shake his head and spread his hands. "Can you sympathize with me, my friend? I'm a King Secretary General after all, not an intelligence dealer in the black market. I have my concerns and my difficulties. You can't come to my office as if you've gone to some gay club and expect everyone to take off their underwear and be honest with each other in 5 minutes. Say something that can be said." Russell dragged a chair over and sat down. He smiled. "I don't mind." Jaeger put down his pen and took a deep breath. He tried to resist the urge to pick up the pen and stab someone in the throat. He reached out and pointed at the 2 stacks of documents on the table that were almost half a meter high. "What do you want to hear? Victory report? Bad news? It's all here, Russell. You'll know at a glance. What else do you want to hear from me?" On his left, the victory reports were piled up like a mountain. On his right, the bad news enjoyed the same height and treatment. There was almost no difference. In the half a month since the start of the war, the increase of these reports had not stopped. While the two were talking, documents were constantly blown in through the vacuum pipe and piled up by the artificial retard who acted as the secretary. Relying on the outpost of the celestial genealogy and the expansion of the Silver Sea, a large number of ordinary people without souls were able to fight in hell. After gaining the geographical advantage, the shortage of manpower was greatly alleviated, but with the power of the present realm to contend with the entire abyss. No matter how great the advantage was, it still did not make people optimistic. At this moment, within the range of the entire depth of 30 meters, there were still fierce battles taking place on the battlefield. Between the border and hell, under the command of the Celestial Society, the present realm built a high wall, hoping that this deep tide could come to an end as soon as possible. The success of the battle against Bustling gave the present realm a shot of confidence. On the battlefield, they finally did not have to face strange forces such as the Order of Corruption and the Serenity Society. They also did not have to worry that the souls of the sacrificed would be taken away by the abyss. The demonic wisdom was completely dispersed by the Continuation Institute, divided and removed, and carried out harmless treatment. It was estimated that after 2 cycles, it would be completely finished. At that time, the solidified souls scattered in the abyss would no longer be able to be united by the gravity of the abyss. Instead, they would gradually dissipate in the long flow and finally sprinkle between the infinite depths and hell, broken into pieces, and its core would be permanently preserved in the Continuation Institute's blockade, or gloriously become a part of it, assume the position of a research subject, and usher in countless messy experiments. Although it was always uncomfortable because of its mysticism and overly cruel style, you could always trust the Continuation Institute in terms of isolation. Half and half. It seems that no one has gotten serious yet. Russell sighed softly. "I'm afraid the bad days are still long. The movements of the various factions are a bit big recently. It really makes an old man like me flustered." Flustered? Huh. Jaeger couldn't even be bothered to sneer. Even if the various factions were powerful, they had paid a lot of blood in the battle against Bustling. Even if it was compared to the rich achievement of permanently eradicating one of the elements of destruction. After all, many sacrifices were no joke. It was also during this period that all the factions had completed their internal replacement. Aside from the 3 who were nearing the end of their lifespan or were on the verge of solidification, the other sacrifices had more or less left their own legacies, or simply were reborn with the blessings of the gods, dragon veins, and all kinds of secret methods to preserve themselves. According to the style of the Continuation Institute, being a tool for a day was a tool for a lifetime. Their style was to make the best of everything. No one knew if the creators and grandmasters were truly sacrificed or if they were using this as an excuse to completely turn into a secret project. However, those guys would definitely not make a losing deal. The Egyptian factions were still shrouded in sandstorms. The pharaoh's tomb had its own defensive zone as stable as Mount Tai, and the situation announced to the public was equivalent to no situation. Aside from the special envoy stationed by the Directorate of Defense to ensure the stability of the situation, nothing else was known. But even if the sky fell, it would not be their turn to be in trouble. After all, during the battle, in order to protect Prince Seth, Egypt had actually taken out 6 relics of authoritarianism in one go. The wealth of the family was so rich that even the Directorate of Defense was shocked. With the cultivation points earned, the pantheon of Rome gave birth to 3 crowned gods in one go: Minerva, Venus, and Aphrodite. The Imperial Guard began its 3rd expansion and recruitment, and began to participate in the disputes on the front line. The Americans no longer concealed their actions and took out the war weapon that they had been preparing for decades: the heart of extinction, the solar ephemeris. The official report of its use had been sent to the desk of the Directorate of Defense, and many people had been arguing over it these days. The Russian Federation's Knights of No Return was once again reorganized, and 6 holy spirits were sent down in one go. The Archangel Legion was also completely unsealed. As for Dongxia, apart from announcing that the Chunjun plan had entered the 2nd phase, they only made a few announcements about the internal member changes, but the waves that had been stirred up had not calmed down yet. In the 2 announcements about the appointment and dismissal of members, the first was that the old man of the Jin family had reappeared and awakened the relic of authoritarianism, the snake slaying sword, as the commander of the frontline battle. Fu Sangwang had officially retired, and the temporary replacement of the Qilin's position and the coordination and management of the defense area was a rank 5 crown god that no one knew. None of the information was known, and the only thing that was revealed was his code name: Chaos. Suddenly, without any warning, a peerless powerhouse jumped out from a crack in the rock. This was King ridiculous. The continuous actions broke the situation that had been in place for a long time. For a moment, no one could predict the trend and direction of the future, and no one dared to act rashly. You've pretty much heard everything that you wanted to hear. Jaeger paused for a moment and asked meaningfully, "Next, you should say something that I want to hear, right? Wow, your Director of Defense is so big, and it's the new year. Why are you arguing with a child like Huaishur?" Russell was stunned. "Look, he's already advanced. Do you think he'll spit out the correction points for you? This kind of thing isn't over just by putting it in your pocket. There has to be an explanation." Jaeger's expression was solemn. Besides, even with the size of the Directorate of Defense, the correction points are precious war resources. Although the Directorate of Defense had accumulated an unknown amount of correction points through the maintenance and integration of the present realm in the past 70 years, the true number of reserves was still the most confidential of secrets. Besides, with a large reserve, the expenditure was also large. There were so many gaps every day when they opened their eyes. Even if they were to move around and tear down the east wall to repair the west wall, how long could it last? The gap would only get bigger. The battle against Boshuan a while ago could be considered as filling a huge gap in demand. Not only did it expand the range of the Silver Ocean, it also greatly strengthened the stability of the present realm's defense line. And to this day, it was still creating a steady stream of correction points to supply the consumption of the war. If it weren't for the fact that the strategy really didn't allow for rash advances, Jaeger would have already wanted to usurp the Continuation Academy and kill another. It would be best if he could kill the rancher. Everyone could live a few fat years, and everyone could drive a Bentley and receive another 50-month salary. Wouldn't that be perfect? Unfortunately, the ideal was plentiful, but the reality was too harsh. Therefore, Jaeger could only think of another way. Now, he glared at Russell with red eyes, and thousands of words only wanted to condense into one sentence. Mother asterisk Kerr refund. And Russell began to talk about it left and right. It was impossible to pay for the money. The landlord didn't have any surplus food, so how could he expect him, a long-term worker, to contribute? He thought about it. The wool comes from the sheep's back. If he wanted to solve this problem, he could only use the tool Huaishur to take the blame. Speaking of which, he rolled his eyes and suddenly asked, recently, the Continuation Academy seems to be doing something new? Jaeger's expression twitched. You see, the child doesn't have a job. He eats and uses the things at home all day long. Idling around isn't a solution. If you ask him to pay back the money, what can he come up with? In the end, he still needs a job, right? Russell held his chin and smiled. Why don't you arrange it? Chapter 1082. Unexpectedly, the arrival of the second natural enemy caused the atmosphere in the camp to become even more solemn. During this silent meal, no one spoke. After they finished eating, no one left. They sat in their chairs and waited quietly. Lu Jia, who was in charge of lunch, didn't say anything either. She calmly served everyone tea and fruits before sitting down. In the unbearable silence, only the general leaned back in his chair and lowered his head indifferently. He took out an aluminum tube from his pocket and skillfully bit off the other end of the cigar. Then, he tilted his head and lit it with a lighter. Beside his daughter, Chu Hai raised his head and glanced over. The cigar that just lit up with red light went out silently. The general frowned and lit it again. But this time, he couldn't light it up no matter what. When he put down the lighter and looked over with a frown, he only saw an innocent traveler holding a cup of water. There are children here. As an adult, you have to set an example, Chu Hai said. At least for America, right? Heh, America? I can't represent America anymore. I can't even represent myself. The general raised the shackles on his hands and looked at the extinguished cigar. He opened his mouth and bit off a section. Then he chewed on the spicy tobacco leaves and shook his head with a sneer. From the looks of it, the only meaning of education is to serve as an example. To be honest, I'm still discussing education with others in hell. Chu Hai smiled and glanced at a certain spot in the middle of the long table. He suddenly asked, You've been waiting for so long. You can't just watch, right? Do you have any teaching experience to share? Between Toronis and Ji Xiangtian, the two of them turned around in confusion. Instantly, they felt a chill spreading from their souls. Why didn't they notice it? Such an obvious target. Just like the mountains of bowls and chopsticks in the sink, the countless to-do lists on the office desk, and all the problems that were tossed aside and never paid attention to. It was so obvious, so impossible to ignore. Someone was sitting there. He was there from the beginning. It's just that you didn't want to see it. I hope. Everyone, enjoy your meal. From the throat of the silent figure came the static sound of a speaker. It was like slowly pressing on a keyboard. He carefully chose his words and replied, I don't wish to disturb. Age, unable to determine. Their gender could not be determined. It was impossible to judge his appearance. As for his name, there was no need to even mention it. That figure was covered in a biohazard protective suit. Even his face was covered in a thick gas mask. But what could the people present only rely on their vision to observe? Heart exploration, blind vision, soul resonance, intuition. Everything, every observation method when falling on that person could only see an empty void. This is the first time we've met, or perhaps the second time we've met. Perhaps none of you have any impression of me, but I've interacted with all of you quite a few times. The representative from the Continuation Academy said. No, to be more precise, he was the Continuation Academy itself. Among the three major organizations under the Astronomical Society, he was the recorder of fate in the idealistic country, the director of the governing bureau, and the administrator of the Continuing Academy. You can use the most convenient way to call him Dean, or whatever you like. He didn't care anyway. There was no information, no records, and no news circulating in the outside world. The Continuation Court was very cautious in handling all information regarding this administrator. not only to protect him, but also for the safety of others. What he represented was the dark side of the astronomical society, all the ugly places in the present realm, and all the unknown distortions and destruction. Even Kieran himself rarely left the Continuation Academy and appeared in front of others because of the excessive distortion value he was tainted with. Indeed, it was just as he said. No one would have the appetite to eat anymore. The moment he appeared, an aura that was enough to drive ordinary people crazy continuously spread out from his body. Right where he was, the distortion of reality had already begun to occur. Even though he was in the deepest part of hell, flesh and blood wriggled under his feet. Behind the pitch-black eyepiece, there seemed to be countless bizarre illusions and nightmares flashing one after another. Under the heavy protective suit, the limbs wriggled abnormally. It was hard to tell whether this was an illusion or reality. Since we're here, we've eaten, and we've experienced the necessary hospitality. Now it's time to talk business. Chu-Hai held his chin and asked indifferently, I'm very curious. Why did the Astronomical Society rush us here? To explore the bottom of the abyss again? He paused for a moment and said seriously, I alone am enough for this kind of thing. There's no need for others to help, right? It wasn't that he looked down on others. It was that he was dissatisfied that the Astronomical Society arranged for his daughter to be in the team. Even though his daughter was stronger than countless people, as a father, how could he bring his daughter to the battlefield? Please don't worry. The number of people will exceed the requirement, the dean replied calmly. We must do our best. There must be no mistakes or failures. As he spoke, he raised his hand and opened the briefcase on the table in front of him. He took out a USB and inserted it into the port behind his head. The sealed memories were released again. After the backup consciousness went through 15 verifications, it was connected to his soul. Thus, the secret sealed in his mind was opened. It was unknown if he had recorded the speech in advance, but even his speech became smooth. I've gathered everyone here for the most crucial battle plan of this War of Worlds. It's also the top secret of the Continuation Academy. He gave the answer in an electronic voice that was so stiff that it didn't have any fluctuations. The battle plan regarding destructive element, Buoxuan, for a moment, the entire long table welcomed a long silence. Everyone stiffened for a moment and raised their heads in confusion. They suspected that they had heard wrongly. Impossible. Chu-Hai was the first to shake his head. Buoxuan is indestructible. The wisdom of the abyss is one with the abyss. If you want to eradicate it, you have to wipe out all creatures with brains in hell. That's not realistic at all. If the Buddha, who had once fused miracles and disasters, had an instant of eternity from nirvana, and had no traces or traces left behind by future generations, could be called enlightenment, then Buoxuan was the opposite of obsession itself. The deep-rooted evil, the never-ending desire, the evil thoughts and malice that flowed out from the depths of the soul, and the cruel nature of all creatures for the rest of their lives. And even more, the demonic wisdom that was now spread throughout all hells in the abyss and worshipped by countless churches was the crystallization and result of eternal desire and desire in hell. Just like how a huge star would pull countless asteroids into its gravitational belt. As long as it existed, it would constantly interfere with the operation of the Silver Ocean. This gravitational force from hell was constantly spying on the Silver Ocean, looking for any opportunity that could be taken advantage of, and casting the haze from hell on the Silver Ocean from every opening. As the former guardian of the Silver Ocean, Chu-Hai couldn't be more familiar with its existence. It was precisely because of this that he understood the absurdity of this plan even more. It's not the destruction of the body and soul, the dean replied. Dismantle, dissect, decentralize, contain, seal, and finally, neutralize. Even though the element of destruction still exists, it doesn't have the ability to cause harm. Minimize its interference until it is finally sealed and contained. Chu-Hai shook his head. I won't talk about the success rate for now. How do you determine its location? Buoxuan's paradise had never floated up. Even at such a moment, it was still hidden behind the waves of the deep tide, hidden in the deepest part of the quiet zone. That chaotic sea was the hotbed that nurtured all disasters, and at the same time, it was also a natural maze. If one barged in unprepared, they would only be lost in the eternal phenomenon of chaos with no way out. It's like a hydrological survey, Mr. Chuhai, the dean replied. Day after day, we throw in dyed markers and trace them back to the source until we determine the direction and destination of all the souls and origin substances. This isn't difficult. It's just a painstaking effort. A painstaking effort. It sounded simple, but no matter who it was, they could all feel the cruelty behind it. However, at this moment, no one asked what those dyed markers were. In the Continuation Academy, there were no legal or moral restraints because they were bound by eternal responsibility. Even death couldn't free them. Everyone was well aware of this. This isn't a whim, but a plan that can lead to success. The dean continued. With the approval of the precursor, we began the relevant experiments and calculations 80 years ago. 40 years ago, we completed the preliminary plan. 19 years ago, we completed the second review and derivation. 6 years ago, we obtained the support of the 5 permanent consuls and the participation of the 5 great lineages. The detailed battle plan was completed a year ago. Now, everything is ready, Mr. Chuhai. Including us? Chuhai asked with a smile that wasn't a smile. Including all of you. A stack of documents floated out from the dean's briefcase and landed on the table. On the documents were dozens of signatures that had been forgotten by the people involved. They were guarantees that they had signed themselves. All of you have already agreed. Just before you set off, perhaps. Chuhai coldly picked out a piece of paper and tore it to shreds. But don't forget, minors don't have the permission of their guardians. The legal documents they sign are not valid. At the time, you said the same thing. You objected, but you changed your mind. The dean took out another document stamped with Chuhai's seal, calmly telling him, after we showed you a certain possibility in the future 7 years later, the seal from the natural enemy was on that piece of paper. At the same time, the memories that the weapon grandmaster had personally sealed on the paper were also awakened. This caused Chuhai to sink into silence. He didn't say anything else. In the deathly silence, only the white emperor's son looked around in confusion. He didn't know what had happened. He subconsciously pulled on his father's sleeve. However, Chuhai didn't respond. It was as if he was petrified. Take it easy. The general shook his head. Children have to grow up eventually. Can you take care of her for the rest of her life? No, I can't. Chuhai turned around and looked at the person who spoke. He finally stopped smiling. Like an archaeologist holding a pickaxe and examining a specimen in front of him, he revealed a calm expression, as if he was in a working state. There was no sadness or joy. Under the gaze of those eyes, everything was the will of the heavens, including death itself. It couldn't be resisted. That was the most ancient Eastern Xia's killing intent, rebellion, ambition, struggle, and even the ferocious god created by sin and death. Life and death were in the hands of a single thought. This was a weapon grandmaster. The general suddenly clenched his fists. How many illusions of death had that pair of eyes produced in an instant? Beheading, slicing at the waist, tearing apart a carriage, burning, dismembering, piercing the heart. Countless deaths descended on the soul and body from the illusions, bringing real pain. It caused that pair of eyes to suddenly widen and burn red. Cracking sounds could be heard. He was drenched in sweat. It was as if a blood-colored wave had appeared out of nowhere and covered the entire world, pushing everything towards destruction equally. After a long period of death, everything condensed into specimens and was excavated again. But very quickly, that hair-raising illusion disappeared without a trace. Chuhai had already lowered his eyes. He calmly put away the document, folded it, and finally put it into his pocket. It was as if he had regained his composure. But that terrifying mass that could no longer be hidden caused the bubble world behind the door to constantly emit waves of unbearable wails. Now, does anyone have any other questions? The dean asked. No one had any questions. It was just a war. Would anyone here want to turn around and leave? Long before the Continuation Academy chose them, they had already investigated them for who knew how many years. Every one of them would accept their mission, accept this responsibility, and bear this sacrifice. There will be no exceptions. Although I have no other choice, as a father, I don't want my child to see me in such a terrifying state. Chuhai sighed softly and kissed his daughter's forehead, giving her his last blessing. When does it begin? He asked. Very soon. The dean opened the briefcase for the last time and placed an ancient phonograph on the table. When a brand new vinyl record was placed under the probe, ancient jazz music with some noise came from the brass speaker. In that instant, the illusory memory brought the plan from the Continuation Academy into everyone's soul. It was as if it wanted to imprint everyone's work into their instincts, down to their every breath. The dean lowered his head and looked at his watch, silently counting down, until the minute hand and the hour hand overlapped. He said now. In that instant, the abyss wailed. Continuation Academy number 170. Record and test plan. Annex 03. Timetable. 1300 hours. 00. Destruction element. Buoshuan battle begins. 1301. 02. Janus Gate opens, connecting to the palace of 10,000 demons. At the same time, witness destruction element, Buoshuan. At the same time, battle begins. Activation. 1301. 07. Jixiang Tian dies. Mars is heavily injured. Wolf Bloodsword is damaged. 1301. 10. Lucius dies. 1301. 11. Lucius is heavily injured. She is replaced by Lucius. 1301. 13. Fu Sangwang is heavily injured. Chuhai is heavily injured. Tauronus dies. Target Buoshuan is heavily injured. 1301. 30. Buoshuan is reborn. Activation is successful. 1301. 41. Abnormal fluctuations in the trajectory of time are detected. Bivrost begins to correct. 1302. 00. Buoshuan splits. The plan enters the second phase, the sixth candidate. 1302. 01. Alvin Hei dies. Tipiurit dies. Surtur dies. 1302. 10. Fu Sangwang dies. Buoshuan is heavily injured again. At 1302. 36. The secret ritual was activated. The cherubim died, and the staff of Gabriel was completely destroyed. 1302. 59. Continuation Academy's descent phase ends. 1303. 01. Creator Jiru dies. Creator Herman dies. Grandmaster Manwin dies. 1303. 03. 1303. 09. Chuhai destroys Buoshuan's core for the fourth time. At the same time, the plan enters the third phase. 1303. 39. Destruction element, Buoshuan disintegrates. Deconstruction is complete. 1303. 40. Destruction element, Buoshuan containment ends. At the same time, confirm the silencer's reaction. The battle ends. 1303. 50. Retreat ends. 1304. 10. Buoshuan's remnants erupt. Deep blowout begins. 1305. 00. Demonic corruption spreads. 19. 9 o'clock. Impact arrives. Bivros 6th, 19th, and 21st links are damaged. 21. 00. 00. Observation record ends. Late at night, London. Fleischer woke up from a dream. In the hospital bed, he propped himself up in confusion and looked out the window. In the night sky, stars suddenly fell like rain. So beautiful, like tears. Chapter 1083. The funeral would begin 2 days later, at 6 o'clock in the afternoon. Because the Continuation Institute hadn't finished its work and there were still many things to prepare, this funeral was only announced internally and not publicly. In addition to the representatives and members of the major genealogies, as a member and successor of the Celestial Genealogy, Fleischer also received an invitation from the Secretariat under Russell's arrangement to attend with Russell as an accompaniment. As expected, the atmosphere was solemn. In the spacious auditorium, under the projection of reality, all the participants were calm and serious. They sat in their seats and didn't say a word. Their natural enemy, Chu Hai, sat silently beside the mystic bird and silently stared at the names engraved on the wall. The siblings, Lucius and Lakia, were still receiving treatment in the Continuation Institute and couldn't come in person. Originally, Huaisher thought he could see Elder Luo, but the old man who looked coldly at life and death didn't come. After he got what he wanted from the Astronomy Society, he returned to hell again. He didn't even see Huaisher's face. He only left him a note, asking him to tell Luo Xian where he went when he saw her. He didn't want to say more about the inside story. Huaisher sighed and put away the note. He raised his head and looked at the stage. The slightly late Jaeger looked extremely haggard. Too many things had happened in the past few days, constantly tormenting his spirit and endurance. However, Jaeger was still an ordinary person. Even if he had the technology of the Astronomy Society, it was still limited. If it wasn't for the little bit of rest time, there would be one more person on the list today. Today, we gather in one place to remember the heroes who passed away. May their souls live forever and take care of the world. In the silent auditorium, only the hoarse voice echoed. He recited every name that passed away so forcefully, as if he was using all his strength to squeeze the words out of his lungs. In the solemn atmosphere, only the low voice echoed. Their sacrifice wasn't in vain. Because of their dedication, the element of destruction, Boishuan was successfully contained. More than 200 abyssal orders collapsed as a result, and countless abyssal orders fell into eternal slumber. The dream disease, omega sadomasochism, deep syndrome, mind fission, and many other elementium plagues and memes have been eradicated. The total number of people who were saved was more than 164,000, and there were even more. As a result, his cultivation value had already reached 46%, and it was still increasing slowly. These are the treasures they left behind, and they will be the lights that will guide us forward. Huaisher did not hear the rest of the words clearly. It was too suffocating. As a result, he gradually fell into a trance during the long period of listening. After a long time, Russell patted him on the shoulder and woke him up. Only then did he realize that the auditorium was empty. Everyone had already left. Only he and Russell were left sitting there, staring at the names engraved on the metal. "Is it over?" Huaisher asked blankly. "What else?" Russell asked. "Let's go, Huaisher. I still have work to do in the afternoon." Huaisher didn't say anything. Since 2 days ago, in a long period of shock, he still hadn't recovered from the brief announcement. After removing the irrelevant embellishments, the straightforward results were too cold. It always made people feel depressed and unable to get rid of the knot in their hearts. He even suspected that those guys from the Directorate of Defense did it on purpose. There was a sense of step-by-step indifference. It was unpleasant. "Isn't this a little too cold?" He sighed tiredly. "Isn't that how bureaucracies are?" Russell shook his head. "Comparing the results, it's all worth it. Why, sure, you have to learn to accept reality. Besides, who would be surprised by something that was already expected?" Huaisher stiffened. "What do you mean? Do you know what the Continuation Institute style is? It's not a sure thing, but a foolproof one." Russell sighed. "They don't usually speak, but once they do, as long as they follow their plan, there's absolutely no problem at all. Unless it's absolutely safe, they won't act rashly and take any risks. If the Directorate of Defense is a centrist and balanced party, then they and the Utopia are absolute opposites. But have you ever thought that after so many years of planning, there would be so many sacrifices?" In a hurry, Huaisher only felt a buzzing in his head. It was hard to understand. "What do you mean?" The literal meaning, Huaisher. The list of sacrifices was destined from the beginning. Russell replied straightforwardly. Maybe when the timetable was written, the battle against Boishuan hadn't even begun yet. If you ask me, most likely, each of them had already received the news of their death before they set off. Even according to the style of the Continuation Institute, the time of death might be accurate to the minute and second. Everything is part of the plan, Huaisher. All sacrifices are meaningful, and all deaths must belong to someone. Their funerals have been held long before they set off. What's here today is just a process, an announcement, an official answer, a notice to everyone who should know. Other than that, there's no meaning. Russell paused for a moment, sighed, and looked at the distant sky. Because the people who really need a funeral are not here. When the mighty bell rang in the sky, countless white pigeons rose into the air. At this moment, Dongsha, Rome, Egypt, America, everything in the present world ushered in silence again. It was like a moment of silence of compassion. An elegy was played, with so many sacrifices and miracles as the price. With the cultivation points brought about by this battle as a sacrifice, with the three great mystic instruments as a guide. In the deepest part of the Astronomical Association, the light on the Silent One's steel was lit up again. The projection of the silver sea appeared again. The sea of souls that gathered all humans surged with brilliant waves, and the sound of the waves was like singing. The power to correct the world was once again operating here. It caused waves to appear in the eternal sea of brilliance again. It was towards the border defense line that was still burning with the flames of war. On the endless sea, in the eternal fog, in the iron rain of the wilderness, and between the burning mountains, it was also towards hell. The pioneering teams buried between the snow and sharp blades, the lonely people lost in the depths, and the fearless people who snuggled together with a smile and hugged each other to death. In the battles that started not long ago, in the wars that would continue into the future, the tranquil ripples from the present realm slowly expanded. Just like a late mother, it gently opened its arms and hugged every wandering lonely soul, soothing the sadness and despair on all the empty faces. Finally, it smiled and held their hands. They stepped on the way home. From now on, there would be no more obstacles on the way home. Half a month later, in the deepest part of the dragon vein in Dongsha, a mighty roar echoed. In the brilliant flames flowing underground, an ancient stone altar slowly rose. Under the support of layers of mystic instruments, it emitted a dark light. In the slowly opening spirit coffin, the rich smell of herbs rose with the bubbles. The reborn person slowly opened his eyes. He saw the smiling face of Mystic Bird. How does it feel to be reborn? It sucks. Fu Sangwang panted and shook his head. It feels like I'm running away. What about the others? Are the others okay? Jishang Tian has reached the end of her life and left her legacy in advance. Awin Hei and Tipi Uret's consciousness have most likely returned to the embrace of the living God. Surtur's solidification can no longer be reversed. He was the first to sign up, I'm afraid. As for the Continuation Academy, they have their own arrangements. We outsiders can't interfere, but they will definitely not let this sacrifice go to waste. Mystic Bird sighed and patted him on the shoulder. I spent a lot of effort to bring you back. Don't let his efforts go to waste. I know. Fu Sangwang was silent for a long time and slowly nodded. I just helped to take care of my daughter for a few years, and I have to repay such a big favor. I feel bad. As he spoke, he was about to get up, but suddenly he froze on the spot. Something's not right. In the silence, he looked down at his hands in confusion and gradually widened his eyes. Is there a mistake somewhere? The thunder echo that used to be as natural as breathing had disappeared, and the eternal blessings from the Qilin had been completely exhausted. The stigmata was gone. More importantly, isn't this normal? What's wrong? Xin Niao picked up the camera hidden in his sleeve and pointed it at his old friend's dull face. Come, look here, this is a precious memory. Look at you, you're alive and kicking. Aren't you very, very cute? In the silence, it was so clear. In the distance, Kwafu, who was poking his head out from behind the door, could not hold it in anymore. He held his stomach and laughed hysterically. He slapped the ground, and suddenly the earth shook. Ha 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 ha! In the reflection of the camera, Fu Sangwang looked up, revealing his chubby white cheeks, pink and soft like a little dumpling. He looked at his new body in a daze. What the hell? The former number one in Dongsha screamed, Why did I become a 2-year-old child? What's wrong with being a child? Children have great potential. Mystic Bird's expression became serious, and he answered earnestly, "You don't know the cost of living until you're in charge of the house, right? There's only so much living soil left at home, so you should save it. To be honest, if it weren't for the fact that you can't accept it, I like to save some things for you. Old thing, I'll kill you." Fu Sangwang roared, jumped up with all his strength, and punched Mystic Bird's knee. Then, a crisp sound came from his tender fingers. He slowly bent down. Wah! It was so painful that he cried out. After a short rest and examination, after confirming that it was just swelling and there were no other problems, Sangwang was discharged from the hospital. In order to maintain his little dignity, he seriously refused the children's clothes provided by Bai Zhe and still wore his original clothes. But the sleeves and trouser legs were rolled up many times, which looked very strange. As he walked, he would accidentally come out from his collar. A young man with the surname Yuan, who was passing by, said that he was cute. After pinching his face, he walked away, completely unaware of the cold eyes behind him. Damn brat, just you wait. When I level up again, you'll be King dead. In Mystic Bird's office, the two sat behind the table again, and finally had time to talk about the end of the mission. Where's Little White? Fu Sangwang, who had just sat down, asked directly. She's asleep. Mystic Bird tilted his head and wanted to light the pipe, but after seeing Fu Sangwang's current state, he helplessly put down the pipe, which made the former number 1 in Dongxia furious again. In order to avoid destroying their many years of friendship, he quickly continued the original topic. Little White is fine. No problem. But after seeing you die with her own eyes, she went through nirvana when she came back. So she'll probably sleep for a long time this time. It seems that she's too sad. There's no way to hide it from her. Fu Sangwang shook his head, and his tender face showed an unusual vicissitude. What about the death trial? What about the death trial that was supposed to happen 7 years later? Mystic Bird was silent for a long time, and he wanted to say something but stopped. Fu Sangwang's eyes widened, and he almost crawled up from the chair and stood on the table in disbelief. Hey, I've already died once, and even took out the Kirin. It won't be a waste of effort, right? Don't worry, it won't be a waste. Mystic Bird's expression was complicated, and he waved his hand. 60% of 100% is no longer absolute. Plus, there's still a high, so there won't be any problems. That's more like it. Fu Sangwang breathed a sigh of relief and sat back on the table and snorted. I've told you many years ago, weapon grandmasters are like drinking poison to quench thirst. Not only is it against the heavens, but it will also bring disaster to your descendants. And if you're not careful, your whole family will die. But you just didn't listen. You insisted on letting a high level up. Now you regret it, right? What else can I do? Mystic Bird asked. Back then, Lu Wu died, and you know what the Dongxia system was like, right? Even you risked your life to cultivate the divine art in reverse, and you won't allow others to sacrifice themselves? Fu Sangwang did not speak. For a moment, both of them fell into silence. However, compared to the solemn atmosphere before, the atmosphere was much more relaxed now. Finally, the great trouble left behind back then was gone. So many years of waiting, so much planning and preparation. And with this achievement of eliminating the element of destruction, the correction value obtained offset the originally increasing calamity. 7 years later, the calamity of solidification had disappeared, but on the other hand, it had become the Red Luan Star movement, and it pointed to a certain guy that made Mystic Bird's teeth ache. F***CK. This was what made Mystic Bird feel the most uncomfortable. He had calculated and calculated, yet he had missed the most crucial point. Could this be fate? Wasn't this a little too outrageous? Thinking of this, he subconsciously raised his head and looked at the ceiling, and then Fu Sangwang kicked him in the face. Stop looking. You don't have much time left, and you're still looking. Fu Sangwang glanced at his calm expression and couldn't help but get angry. What can you see if you look at it every day? I just hope that I can see the future. Mystic Bird was silent for a long time, and then he shook his head. Be prepared, Sangwang. We don't have much time left. The signs of chaos had already appeared. Even if he couldn't see anything clearly, he could feel that more cruel, more ferocious, and more dark changes were slowly brewing in the rolling tide of fate, gradually attacking this world. No one knew how much time was left for them. It's useless to think too much. You can only scare yourself. Fu Sangwang tried to tiptoe and patted his shoulder. When we old people are all dead, the young people will have grown up, and the future will be handed over to them. Who said that? I could still work for another 30 years. 30 years? You can barely hold on for another 10 years. It's right to not lose in momentum. Look at celestial genealogy. She's so skilled in this. I've learned it. Forget it. That's called bravery in the face of battle. You can't learn it like this. In this long afternoon, dust rustled from the sunlight outside the window. Occasionally, when he was dealing with things, Mystic Bird couldn't help but lower his head and look at the deepest part of the dragon vein, the slender silhouette among countless streams of light. Under the shadow of the giant vermilion bird's wings, the girl was quietly sleeping, immersed in a long dream. Lightning faintly appeared around her body. Only one step left, the last step. Sleep, sleep. When you wake up, you'll grow up. Mystic Bird smiled expectantly and whispered his wish. He threw away the haze that was transferred to his future as a price and didn't care about it anymore. No matter how much darkness there was, it was still darkness, and there wouldn't be any change. It didn't matter if he sank deeper or shallower into the quagmire. But light only needed pure light, and it couldn't be tainted with a trace of flaw. After completely integrating with this auspicious blessing from the Qilin, in at most 10 years, there wouldn't be a second White Emperor's son in Dongxia in this world. Only the youngest natural enemy, White Emperor's son. Chapter 1084. Am I going to be arranged again? Huaisha suddenly shuddered and felt a headache coming on. Her persecution radar was reacting. She was in a trance, and her thoughts were in a mess. The premonition of death flashed by. Could it be that the old bastard is going to harm me again? Mr. Huaisha? Mr. Huaisha? Are you listening? Opposite him, behind the desk, the clerk with sunglasses looked up from the report and looked at him in confusion. Were you distracted just now? No. Huaisha shook his head and looked around with a serious face. He was full of curiosity. Where's this? It's a secret, the clerk replied with a blank expression. You'd better not ask too much about things you shouldn't know. By the way, have we met before? Huaisha scratched his head and leaned closer to look carefully. He reached out and took off the huge glasses on the clerk's face. He was stunned. Why do you look exactly like old Lou? Be serious. We're talking here. The clerk slammed the table angrily, took back the sunglasses, and put it back on his face. Who is old Lou? I don't know him. Go back and sit down. Okay, why are you angry? Huaisha returned to the chair, but his eyes were attracted by the scene outside the window. In the faint festive music, a group of figures in black suits and sunglasses suddenly appeared, carrying a big wooden box. They were singing and dancing, looking at the room through the window and twisting around. It was as if they were waiting for something, happy and expectant. Being stared at like that, Huaisha always had a premonition of uneasiness. He couldn't help but look back. Ahem, what are they doing? He's probably the new handyman. The clerk picked up the form in his hand indifferently. Then, according to the usual practice, I need to ask a few questions first. He paused and showed an expectant look. Suddenly, he asked, Name? That's enough. Huaisha slammed the table angrily. If you have something to say, say it. If not, I'm leaving. Okay. Don't worry. The clerk changed his previous coldness and comforted him warmly. Then let's get down to business. Mr. Huaisha, on behalf of the Xingjing realm and the Astronomical Society, I have an important task for you. Huaisha's heart suddenly contracted without warning, especially under the strange gaze of the person behind the sunglasses who resembled old Willow, as well as the gazes of the strange people outside the window who were carrying large wooden boxes. He felt that something was not quite right. However, The clerk clapped her hands and gestured. Next, let me introduce you to the participants of this mission. First, we have Madame A.I. Ching, the inspector from the Command Bureau's aerial floor. She will be participating in this mission as the commander. Huaishir was stunned for a moment before he subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. He looked behind him in surprise. From behind the door, A.I. Ching walked out expressionlessly. She only glanced at Huaishir. It was as if he had never known him. Huaishir smiled shyly. Why are we so distant? We're already so familiar with each other. Do we still have to avoid arousing suspicion? Then he saw another figure walk in from behind the open door. She was young and beautiful, full of vitality like a spring breeze. Huaishir's nerve endings were a little stiff. The clerk, on the other hand, introduced as if she didn't notice. This is the new silent one for the continuation court, Madame Fu Yi. She will provide assistance when necessary. Everyone can get to know each other. Ahem. Huaishir coughed dryly, and his heart twitched. We'll get to know each other. Yes, we'll get to know each other. Is that so? That's good. The clerk smiled. Of course, the most important person in the team is a creator who has come as a specially hired expert. I hope that everyone can prioritize her safety. He knocked on the bell, stuck his head out, and said, Madam Lily, you can come in. Huaishir was petrified on the spot. He stiffly turned his head with difficulty and saw a woman in a white dress walking in from the corridor. She looked at the people in the room timidly. Finally, she smiled at Huaishir and nodded. Mr. Huaishir, long time no see. Long time no see. Huaishir couldn't feel his expression anymore. He felt that his smile must have been very ugly. Under the gaze of the people behind him, he couldn't help but shake on the chair. Mr. Huaishir? Mr. Huaishir? The clerk asked in confusion. Are you okay? I'm fine. Huaishir replied with a trembling voice. It's nothing. The mission is important. I'm just a little nervous. It's okay. The clerk comforted him considerately. Considering that you're the only combat personnel on the team, it'll be difficult to take care of everything. Therefore, we specially recruited a combat expert. You'll definitely work well together. With his words, the last figure walked in from behind the door and waved at Huaishir. Aren't you going to say hello? She pulled back her long hair that was hanging on her shoulder and smiled gently. You're so cold, Huaishir. As senior sister, long time no see. Huaishir greeted her in a hoarse voice. He tried his best to suppress his urge to cry out of fear. He sat on the chair and shivered. He only saw that the few strange people outside the window had already started singing and dancing again. They seemed to be approaching again. They were almost lying on the edge of the window. He looked inside. He waved at Huaishir, indicating that the young man should hurry up and join them. Everyone, let's dance together and be happy. There's no need to talk too much. Huaishir raised his voice and tried his best to put on a serious expression. This is a combat mission. I can't wait to sacrifice my heart for the present. It's all here. The clerk put a thick document in his hand and patted him on the shoulder. My work is done here. Everyone can take their time to look at it. I'll take my leave first. After saying that, she didn't wait for Huaishir to urge her to stay. Under Huaishir's desperate gaze, she quickly left. She even very considerately closed the office door for him. In the end, only a meaningful smile was left. Dead silence. In the dead silence, no one spoke. They just quietly looked at him. Looked at him. Looked at him. Huaishir's hands that were holding the document trembled constantly. He was sweating profusely. What about the mission? Didn't you say you wanted to take a look? A.I. Ching asked. Why don't you open it? Yes, I'm also very curious. Luocian nodded and smiled gently. What kind of mission can require so many people to take action? Huaishir swallowed his saliva. He lowered his head and opened the first page of the hard-shelled document with trembling hands. Then, the 72-pound thick scarlet font suddenly rushed to his retina, leaving a mournful brand like a bloodstain, bringing despair and alarm engraved in his soul. What's wrong? Fu Yi asked. Why aren't you saying anything, Huaishir? Is there a problem? Lily asked worriedly. Mr. Huaishir, you look so pale. Huaishir, panting, raised his head tremblingly. Cold sweat dripped down his face like tears. In his hand, on the cover of the trembling document, a scarlet title was written: Scumbag Huaishir's Execution Combat Operation. At that moment, he saw, on those pretty faces, some cold, some gentle, some pure, and some simple, a kind of terrifying smile that made one's liver and gallbladder appear at the same time. Huaishir's frightened face was reflected in the empty eyes without any light. Then, amidst the jubilant music outside the window, axes, hammers, swords, and spears were slowly raised. Bit by bit, they closed in on Huaishir, closer and closer, until the shadow swallowed up that despairing face. Huaishir closed his eyes and only had time to cover his face and scream, "Don't come over!" Suddenly, he bounced up from the sofa in the office, and the blanket on his body slid to the ground. The girl next to him was also stunned, and she retracted her hand that had just been quietly stretched out as if she had been electrocuted. She didn't know what had happened. Teacher? Yuan looked at Huaishir's tearful face in surprise and worry. Are you okay? Huaishir gasped in horror and looked around. After a long time, he found that he was in the office of the ivory tower on his sofa. He was perfect from head to toe, without any wound. Outside the window, the morning sun shone in. Birds were singing and flowers were fragrant. As for what had happened just now, it was just a dream. It was a dream, just a dream. Ha ha. Huaishir wiped the cold sweat and tears from the corners of his eyes and couldn't help but laugh out loud. Nothing, just, had a nightmare. He raised his trembling hand and waved it slightly, forcing a smile. Don't worry. Well, okay. Seeing that he didn't seem to notice anything, Yuan seemed to be relieved. When Huaishir asked her why she was in his office, the girl who acted as a guest secretary coughed twice with a serious expression and picked up the document in her hand. The notice has just arrived. A special agent from the administration responsible for coordinating border missions will arrive at the Ivory Tower at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. We need to prepare a reception. Well, after all, he is a special agent from the administration. Just treat him well. Huaishir took the notice and glanced at the name casually, and the smile on his face stiffened. A.I. Ching. Teacher? Yuan asked uneasily. Are you okay? Ahem, I'm fine. Huaishir raised his voice and replied. As your teacher, I'm fine. Yuan looked at him suspiciously, picked up the schedule, and reported. In addition, a group of preparatory members from the Continuation Academy will come here today for a short investigation and internship mission. The relevant authorities have sent us a note, hoping that we can guarantee their safety. Ahem, well. After all, it's the continuation. Huaishir just took the schedule, and the smile on his face stiffened, and he couldn't help but collapse. That list, the middle of the list. He saw the name at a glance. Fu Yi. He only felt his ears begin to buzz, and his blood pressure skyrocketed. Is there anything else? His smile had become uglier than crying. I need a rest. There's a meeting that you need to attend in person. It's about the cooperation agreement between the Ivory Tower and the Border Darknet. The relevant representatives will arrive at noon today. Huaishir's vision went black. He raised his hand, took a deep breath, and asked in a trembling voice, What's the name of the representative? It's strange, it's not written on it. Yuan checked the display on the screen and turned it over to show Huaishir. There's only a sign, and it says Gila. Then she saw a rare sight. Her own teacher started to twitch crazily as if he had been electrocuted, like a maggot that was about to die. Teacher? In the end, she couldn't restrain her worry and reached out to touch Huaishir's forehead. What's wrong with you? Do you want to see a doctor? No need. Huaishir resisted the urge to cry, covered his face, and choked. There's no saving me. Don't panic, Huaishir, don't panic. It's just a pure coincidence. Don't panic. Look at the bright side. At least, while his mind was buzzing, he suddenly felt the phone in his arms vibrate. After he opened the app with difficulty, a selfie popped up. It was from White City Station. Luo Xian smiled at the camera. 5 more hours. We'll reach the ivory tower. Do you want to have afternoon tea together? Huaishir was sweating profusely. His hands were trembling, and he couldn't stop at all. This is a dream. This must be a dream. That's right, Huaishir, don't panic. He repeatedly talked to himself, comforting himself as he trembled. But when he looked up and looked out of the window, he couldn't see the strange people who were happily twisting around with the coffin. There was only a slender figure. She was lying on the balcony, eating an ice cream cone, watching all of this and clicking her tongue in wonder. It was as if she smelled the beginning of a good show. Tangi, uninvited. What's wrong? Tangi raised her chin and urged expectantly. Continue, sister. I want to see the next part of the plot. Amidst the silence, Huaishir's tears finally began to fall. Goodbye, Fengshu, goodbye, world. I'm going to die. Chapter 1085. It was impossible for him to die. As the saying went, as long as one was not killed, one could live. The most important thing now was not to panic. Huaishir ran around the office several times like a race before he finally calmed down, at least on the surface. In short, calm down, Huaishir. The Lord God would never send someone to die. F***CK, the Lord God. His mind was in a complete mess now. In a trance illusion, he saw a blind man with tattoos all over his body breaking the world with a punch, laughing at the heavens. Huaishir shook his head hard, but then he saw a figure carrying a zither and dancing disco turn around from his side dam. He's not far from schizophrenia, isn't he? In short, don't worry. Sit down and take a deep breath. Huaishir used up all his reason in this life to resist the urge to cry and jump off the building. He sat on the sofa and closed his eyes. After a little thinking, careful analysis, and serious consideration, he came to a conclusion. Damn, I'm dead. There's only one way left. He suddenly opened his eyes and slammed the coffee table, scaring Yuan, who was not far away, to drop her phone on the ground. On the screen was a half-text message sent to Dr. Yi Su at the school clinic. What should I do if the teacher goes crazy? I'm waiting online urgently. Yuan hurriedly picked up the phone and was about to explain, but she saw Huaishir appear in front of her with a strange and dignified expression. Two big hands pressed on her shoulders, with a familiar warmth. So close. In an instant, the girl's face burned red, and she subconsciously moved back a little. Teacher, too close to Yuan. Huaishir raised his voice and said seriously. The girl was stunned. You have to remember. Huaishir pressed on her shoulders and told her seriously, I'm sick. Yuan was stunned. Yes, I'm sick. Huaishir nodded, as if he was persuading himself. His expression was ferocious. It's a very serious illness. I can't be cured. Yuan subconsciously crushed the phone in her hand. She panicked and didn't know what to do. In short, you must remember to say this no matter who you meet. Last night I had an emergency and had to go to Shambhala for treatment. I'll leave the school to you. Right, where's the box? Where's the suitcase? Right, clothes. Where are the clothes? At home. Forget it. There's no time. I'll buy them when we get there. After that, Huaishir didn't care about anything else. He threw the student aside and rushed to his desk. He pulled out his suitcase from below and stuffed it in randomly. Then, he picked up the box and pushed the door open. Finally, he turned around and reminded his teammates not to forget, leaving them standing there in a daze, unable to react in time. He was simply a hero among the scum. He rushed to the elevator in a few seconds. As soon as the elevator door opened, Lin Zhongshan saw his teacher's disheveled face and disheveled appearance while carrying a suitcase. A familiar feeling suddenly hit him in the face, causing him to finally blurt out the temptation he had been hiding in his heart all along. Teacher, you finally committed a crime and ran away? Kid, don't talk nonsense if you don't understand. Huaishir slapped the back of his head and frantically pressed the elevator button. Don't ask so many questions. Anyway, I have something to do, so I'll leave first. Right? Do you have any change on you? Lend me some to buy the ticket. As he spoke, he directly took out his wallet from Lin Zhongshan's pocket. But after rummaging for a long time, he found that other than less than 200 yuan in change, there was only 2 coins. Why are you so poor? Where did all the money you earned from committing crimes go? Why don't you help your teacher a little? A cough, Yao Xiang. Yao Xiang said that she would keep it for me first. Lin Zhongshan guiltily looked away, making Huai Shi very angry. Being so strict with his girlfriend at such a young age, he definitely won't have a bright future. Tell me, how did your teacher teach such a disciple like you? Anyway, 200 yuan is fine. I'll make do. At this time, there was no time to be calculative. Huai Shi put the money in his pocket, waited for the elevator to open, and rushed straight out. In the end, Lin Zhongshan desperately pulled him back. Be careful, teacher. You can't escape through the front door and I have something important to tell you. I almost forgot. Time is of the essence. If there's anything important, wait for me to come back. I can't wait. Listen to me first. Don't say any more. I'm leaving first. Huai Shi shook off Lin Zhongshan, who was desperately dragging him back, and rushed straight out of the front door. But right in front of the front door, his sorry footsteps came to an abrupt halt. A sudden break. An ear-piercing sound broke the silence. Behind him, Lin Zhongshan covered his face in despair, and Huai Shi was sluggish, petrified, and shattered on the ground. It was as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Right in front of the front door, an aluminum suitcase unique to the astronomy club cast a pitch-black shadow. It was just like his tombstone, angular and square. And right next to the suitcase, the expressionless commissioner of the astronomy club raised his head from his cell phone and looked at him. He was slightly stunned, and then gradually came to a realization. Are you going out? AI Ching asked curiously. Did I come a bad time? No. The corners of Huai Shi's eyes twitched, and he resisted the urge to collapse on the spot. With great difficulty, he squeezed out a flattering smile. Aren't you coming tomorrow? This is a surprise inspection, Huai Shi. AI Ching sighed helplessly. To be able to send a report notice in advance is already giving you a lot of face. Do you really want everyone to agree on a time to come and go through the motions? She paused for a moment and glanced at Huai Shi's disheveled appearance, and behind him, the suitcase that was trying to be stuffed into Lin Zhongshan's hands. Her gaze became sharp. Where are you going? Are you going somewhere far away? Huai Shi trembled as he wiped off his cold sweat and looked back at Lin Zhongshan's house. Right, where are we going? Oh, right, take a walk, take a turn, exercise. Isn't it because the student is lazy and has no motivation to eat all day? So I want to force him to exercise. Weight training. Use the suitcase to carry weights. AI Ching smiled. Yes. At this point, there was no other way. Huai Shi could only harden his heart and put the suitcase into the arms of Lin Zhongshan's house. You see, take to live, use to live. It's expensive to buy a dumbbell, isn't it, Lil 19? Yes. Under the teacher's cold gaze, Little 19 nodded like he was pounding garlic. He lifted the suitcase and began to lift weights on the spot. He twitched as if he had been electrocuted, and his posture was vigorous. Oh, this exercise method is wonderful. I will write it in the observation log later and suggest that the decision-making room promote it. AI Ching seemed to believe him, nodding slightly. But then, she asked directly, why do I feel that you are avoiding me? No, it's nothing. When I knew you were coming, I couldn't be happier. How could I run away? Huai Shi wiped his cold sweat, turned back, and kicked the student. Right, Little 19, hurry up and say hello to your sister. How can you be so rude? Lin Zhongshan almost shed tears. Damn it. Which one of us took the road of evil karma? Being a tool and a scapegoat. Really inhumane. Hi, Miss AI. Miss AI. He squeezed out a guilty smile with difficulty, like Huai Shi. After AI Ching glanced at him, she nodded with understanding. I was wondering why he turned around and ran after seeing me. It turns out that he ran to you to tip you off. He's just like his teacher. Huai Shi turned back and looked over in shock. The teacher and student's eyes met for a moment, and Huai Shi's eyes almost popped out. Why didn't you say so earlier? I wanted to say it, but you didn't listen. I didn't even let you go through the front door. Who knew you would run so fast? But soon the intuition from the road of evil karma sensed that the surrounding temperature was getting lower and lower. Lin Zhongshan shuddered subconsciously, sensing that something was wrong between the two of them. Suddenly, under Huaishi's shocked gaze, he resolutely took a step back. Then he took another big step back, until he was at a safe distance. I almost forgot. He patted his head and said in a monotonous tone, Yao Xiang called me to eat. Teacher, Madam AI, I'll be leaving first. After saying that, under Huaishi's desperate gaze, he carried his suitcase and strode out of sight. Teacher, hold on, I'll leave first. In the crowded hall, there was a strange silence at this moment. Everyone looked in the direction of the door in confusion. The principal's secretary, who was temporarily acting as the principal, and the special inspector from the Astronomical Society. When they looked at each other, the atmosphere was so tense. It felt as if the friction between the Utopia and the Federal Bureau of Investigation had arisen again. The two big shots fought to the end of the realm, and their auras fell, and even hell was obliterated, but in fact, the Utopia was long gone. Huaishi could only tremble. He squeezed out a flattering and flattering smile, wiped his cold sweat, and tried to find something to say. Look at this child. He doesn't know anything and has no manners at all. Don't take offense. There was no other way. At this point, he could only temporarily deal with them and wait for an opportunity to escape. The most important thing was to pass the inspection of the Federal Bureau of Investigation before anything else. However, the countdown in his heart was disappearing crazily, as if every minute and second was pushing him to the edge of death. You seem to be very nervous, Huaishi. AI Qing scrutinized his appearance and said meaningfully, What are you trying to hide? No. Huaishi widened his eyes, pointed to the sky, and swore in a trembling voice, The sun is shining. The Federal Bureau of Investigation shouldn't slander me. Huaishi is an innocent person. There's nothing that can't be told to others. I'm dedicated to contributing to the realm. How can I do anything shameful? If you have any doubts, feel free to investigate. Don't worry, it will only help me prove my innocence. Innocence? What innocence? A curious voice came from his side. Did something happen? We're talking about work. Don't interrupt. Huaishi subconsciously pushed him away, but when she reached out to press on his shoulder, she realized that something wasn't quite right. It was so familiar. It was as if they had met before. Amidst a waterfall of cold sweat, Huaishi trembled. With great difficulty, he turned his head and saw Luo Xian's smiling face. At this moment, it was as if the world had frozen in despair. Huaishi's heart no longer had any warmth. It was completely cold. When the tear-like origin substance flowed out of his soul, he could already see the terrifying future of the vast darkness engulfing him. Feng Shu, can our coffin still be used? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.